Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Cryptic Corpse. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious, where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now find your cozy spot and relax. My name is Jackson Miller. I used to cut down trees for a living, a logger they call it, but that was before everything changed, before I moved to my uncle's old cabin in the deep woods of northern Minnesota. I guess I should start from the beginning. It was 1978, just after New Year's, when I got the letter saying I had inherited Uncle Frank's cabin. I hadn't seen him in almost 15 years, didn't even know he had died. The timing seemed like a sign. My wife Sarah had been gone just 6 months by then, taken from me in a car crash on a rainy Minneapolis street. Our apartment held too many memories, too much pain. When I told my buddies at the lumber mill I was leaving, they thought I was crazy. "You're moving up to Boundary Waters in winter?" Jim had asked, shaking his head. "That's no place for a man alone, especially not now." But I needed alone. Alone was all I had left. The drive up took nearly 8 hours, the last 2 on roads, barely visible under the snow. My old pickup truck groaned and slipped, but somehow we made it. When I finally saw the cabin, my heart sank. The place was a mess, roof sagging on one side, porch steps rotted through, windows filmed with years of grime. Uncle Frank hadn't lived here for years before he died. The lawyer had mentioned that much. I parked and stepped out into snow that came up to my knees. The cold bit at my face, but I barely noticed. I was too busy looking at the trees surrounding the cabin, tall pines that seemed to crowd around like they were watching me. The wind moved through them, making a sound almost like whispers. I'd brought enough supplies for a few weeks, figuring I'd need to make trips to the nearest town, a place called Balsam Falls, about 20 miles south, for anything more. First night, I slept in my sleeping bag on the dusty floor, using my flashlight to check for critters. The cabin had no electricity, no running water, and the old wood stove was rusted through. Morning came with pale light filtering through dirty windows. I made a list of what needed fixing first: roof, stove, outhouse, water pump. Thankfully, years of logging had taught me plenty about construction. My hands knew what to do, even when my heart wasn't in it. Days blurred together as I worked, chopping wood, hauling water from the frozen lake a quarter-mile away, patching the roof with supplies I'd brought from town. The physical labor felt good, kept me from thinking too much about Sarah, about how her side of the bed had been empty for half a year now. I'd been there about 2 weeks when I made my first trip to Balsam Falls for more supplies. It wasn't much of a town. A general store, post office, one diner, and a bar called the Frozen Moose. I stopped at the store first, loading up my cart with canned goods, coffee, tools, and ammunition for my hunting rifle. The old woman at the register raised her eyebrows when I told her where I was staying. "Frank Miller's place? That old cabin's been empty since '63. Most folks thought it would collapse by now." She squinted at me. "You're his nephew?" I nodded, counting out cash for my purchases. "You planning to stay through winter?" When I nodded, again she frowned. "Not many do. Gets mighty lonely out there when the snow piles up. Roads get blocked for weeks sometimes." "Lonely suits me fine," I said. She looked like she wanted to say more, but changed her mind. Instead, she handed me my change and said, "Stop by the Moose before you head back. Folks should know there's someone up at the Miller place again." I wasn't much for socializing, but I did need information about hunting in the area. The bar was dim and smoky inside, half full with men in flannel and work boots. Conversation died down when I walked in, but picked up again after I ordered a beer. The bartender, a burly man with a grey beard, introduced himself as Pete. When I mentioned where I was staying, he got a funny look on his face. "Frank Miller's nephew, huh? Your uncle was an odd duck. Used to come in here ranting about things in the woods, especially in winter. Last few years he was around, barely saw him at all. What kind of things? I asked, curious despite myself. Pete shrugged. Just crazy talk. Something about hunger walking in the deep snow. Most figured it was the isolation getting to him. He wiped the counter. Listen, if you're staying up there, be smart about it. Winter's no joke this far north. People who don't respect it don't last. I promised I would be careful. Finished. My beer and left. On the drive back, snow began falling again, fat flakes swirling in my headlights. The forest seemed darker, the trees closer to the road than I remembered. By the end of my first month, the cabin was actually starting to feel livable. I had the roof fixed, the stove replaced with one I'd bought in town, and had set up rain barrels to collect water. I'd even found time to hunt, though game seemed unusually scarce. I'd see plenty of deer tracks in the snow around the cabin, but never the deer themselves. One evening, as I was organizing some old boxes in what used to be Uncle Frank's bedroom, I found something interesting. Behind a loose board in the closet wall was a metal box, the kind people keep important papers in. Inside were 5 notebooks, their covers worn and pages yellowed. I recognized my uncle's handwriting right away. The same slanted scrawl from birthday cards he'd sent when I was a kid. Curious, I opened the first one and began to read. The early entries were ordinary enough. Notes about weather, hunting success, repairs to the cabin. But as I moved to later notebooks, the tone changed. Uncle Frank wrote about feeling watched in the woods, about dreams of endless hunger. The final notebook was the strangest, filled with frantic writing about the hunger that walks in winter and warnings to never feed it, never answer when it calls with voices you know. I closed the book, telling myself it was just the ramblings of an old man gone strange from too many winters alone. But that night, as wind howled outside my cabin, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over me. Next morning, I went out to check my traps, hoping to catch something for dinner. The sun was bright on the fresh snow, making me squint. As I followed my usual path through the trees, about 50 yards from the cabin, I stopped short. There, on several pines, were deep scratches in the bark, too high up for any normal animal. They looked almost like antler marks, but twisted somehow, and they hadn't been there the day before. I stood there a long time, looking at those marks and listening to the too quiet forest around me. For the first time since arriving, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Something was in these woods with me, something that left strange marks and scared away the game, something that might have driven my uncle to write his desperate warnings, and winter had only just begun. The next few days, I tried to forget about those strange marks on the trees. I told myself it was probably just a moose or elk with odd-shaped antlers, but deep down I knew better. No normal animal would make marks that high up or in that pattern. I kept busy, chopped more wood, fixed the leaky spots in the roof, set new traps for small game. But the woods stayed quiet, too quiet. Even the birds seemed to have disappeared. Then the snow came again, heavy and thick. For 3 days straight, it fell until the drifts piled up past my windows. I was stuck inside, with only the crackling fire and howling wind for company. On the 3rd night of the storm, I woke up suddenly. Something had pulled me from sleep, a sound just at the edge of hearing. I sat up in bed, straining to listen. Jackson. My heart nearly stopped. It was Sarah's voice, my wife's voice, calling my name from somewhere outside in the storm. Jackson, help me. I'm cold. I jumped out of bed, fumbling for my flashlight. This couldn't be real. Sarah was dead, I'd identified. Her body at the hospital attended her funeral. Yet that was her voice, the same soft way she'd say my name when she needed me. I pressed my face to the window, wiping away frost to peer into the darkness. The snow was falling in thick swirls, my flashlight beam barely cutting through it. And there at the edge of the trees was that a figure, a woman in a pale dress, hair blowing in the wind. Sarah, I whispered, my breath fogging the glass. The figure moved, drifting between trees, always just at the edge of where my light could reach. "Jackson, come outside. I need you." My hand was on the door latch before I caught myself. Something was wrong. Sarah would never ask me to come out in a blizzard, and her voice, there was something off about it, like someone trying to copy a sound they'd only heard once. I backed away from the door, heart pounding. Uncle Frank's journal came back to me. "Never answer when it calls with voices you know." Whatever was out. There, it wasn't Sarah. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat with my rifle across my knees, jumping at every creak and groan of the cabin. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world of white. There were no footprints outside my cabin, no sign that anyone or anything had been there. But I knew what I'd heard. That afternoon I found something on my porch that made my blood run cold. A rabbit, or what was left of one. It had been torn apart, but not like an animal would do it for food. The pieces were arranged in a circle, the head in the middle, eyes staring up at the sky. It looked deliberate, like someone had left me. A message? I shoveled it off the porch, trying not to look too closely at the way the blood had frozen in strange patterns on the wood. 2 days later, there was a knock at my door. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I hadn't heard a vehicle, and nobody in their right mind would hike through these woods with the snow this deep. When I opened the door, rifle ready behind it, I found a man standing there. He was older, maybe 60, with dark brown skin and deep lines around his eyes. He wore snowshoes and carried a walking stick topped with strange carvings. "You're Frank, Miller's nephew," he said. It wasn't a question. "Who's asking?" I replied, not opening the door any wider. "My name is Robert Kingbird. I'm from the Ojibwe reservation south of here." He looked past me into the cabin, then back at my face. "May I come in? What I have to say shouldn't be spoken where the forest can hear." Something about his calm, serious manner made me step aside. Once inside, Robert wouldn't sit down until he'd walked the entire cabin, looking carefully at the windows and doors. Then he sat at my kitchen table and stared at me hard. "You've seen things, heard things. That's why I'm here." I thought about denying it, but what was the point? "How did you know?" "The signs are there for those who can read them. And I promised your uncle I'd watch this place." He leaned forward. "This cabin stands on old ground. Hunting ground, but not for men." "What do you mean?" "These woods belong to the Wendigo." "The what?" Robert sighed like he was used to people not understanding. "Wendigo. A spirit of hunger and winter. It takes many forms, but always hungers, always hunts." He tapped the table. "Your uncle knew. He fought it for years." I thought of the journals, the strange warnings. "You knew my uncle well?" I tried to help him, like I'm trying to help you now. From his pocket, Robert pulled out a small leather pouch. "Protection. Hang this above your door, your windows. It won't stop the Wendigo, but it will slow it down." I took the pouch. It smelled of herbs and something else I couldn't name. "Why are you helping me?" "Because no one helped my brother when the Wendigo called to him." Robert's eyes grew distant. "And because what walks in these woods should not spread further." Part of me wanted to laugh, to tell him I didn't believe in spirits and monsters. But I couldn't forget Sarah's voice in the storm, the mutilated rabbit, the claw marks too high on the trees. After Robert left, I didn't hang the charms. I tucked them into a drawer instead. I wasn't ready to accept what he was suggesting. Monsters weren't real. There had to be another explanation. A week passed. The weather cleared enough for me to check my distant traps and explore more of the land that now belonged to me. About a mile north of my cabin, through dense pine forest, I found another cabin. Smaller than mine, more of a trapper's shelter. Curious, I approached it. The door was partially open. Snow drifted across the threshold. Inside was dark and cold, but I could make out a figure sitting in a chair by the cold fireplace. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. I stepped inside, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The figure didn't move. When my light finally fell on him, I nearly dropped the flashlight. It was a man, frozen solid, but not like any frozen body I'd ever seen. His mouth was open in a silent scream, eyes wide with terror, and his chest, God, his chest was wrong. The ribs weren't broken inward, like someone had crushed him. They were broken outward, like something had pushed its way out from inside. I backed out of that cabin fast, fell into the snow, and threw up everything in my stomach. When I could stand again, I ran all the way back to my cabin, packed an overnight bag, and drove straight to Balsam Falls. I spent the night at the small motel in town, drinking whiskey from the bottle to try to forget what I'd seen. In the morning, I went to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Dawson was a big man with a grey mustache and tired eyes. He listened to my story about finding a dead man, nodding occasionally. When I described the body, though, his expression changed. "You say this was at an old trapper's cabin north of the Miller place?" he asked, suddenly alert. "Yes, about a mile through the woods." The sheriff pulled out a map and had me point to where I thought the cabin was. He circled it with a red pen. That would be old Carl Weiss's place. He was reported missing last month. The sheriff studied me. "You sure about what you saw? The chest being damaged like that?" I nodded. "All right. I'll put together a search party. We'll need to recover the body." He closed his notebook. "In the meantime, there's a storm system moving in. You might want to stay in town a few days." But I couldn't. Something pulled me back to the cabin, worry about my supplies, my tools, the life I was building there. So that afternoon, I drove back up the snowy road, the sheriff's promise to bring the search party tomorrow ringing in my ears. That night, I kept every light on. Lanterns, candles, the fire built up high. The radio crackled with weather reports. And then, breaking news. 3 hikers missing in the Boundary Waters area. The search area was being expanded. I sat by the radio, listening to reports, when it happened. A voice cut through the static. Sarah's voice again, whispering my name, but it wasn't coming from outside this time. It was coming from the radio itself. I turned the dial, trying to find a clear station, but her voice followed me across the frequencies. And then other voices joined hers. Men, women, children, all whispering, calling, begging, "Help us, so hungry. Join us, Jackson." I yanked the radio's plug from the wall, but the voices continued for several seconds before fading away. That night, I dreamed of running through endless snow, chasing something I couldn't see but desperately needed to catch. I woke with the taste of raw meat in my mouth and a gnawing emptiness in my stomach no amount of food seemed to fill. The search party arrived the next day. Sheriff Dawson and 4 other men. They used my cabin as a base, heading out to find Carl Weiss's body and look for the missing hikers. I was glad for the company, for the sound of normal human voices that didn't whisper my name from the darkness. That night, a blizzard hit worse than any before. The wind screamed around the cabin, snow piling up so fast you could watch it rise past the windows. The search party was stuck with me, all of us crowded into the small cabin. At midnight, one of the deputies needed to check on their vehicles. He bundled up and went outside. 10 minutes passed. 20. Sheriff Dawson called his name, then sent another man to look. That man didn't come back either. The sheriff, the remaining deputy, and I armed ourselves and went out together. The snow was blinding, the wind cutting through our clothes like knives. We found the first deputy's flashlight, half buried in the snow, a trail of dark drops leading away from it. We followed the trail around the side of the cabin. It ended at the tree line, where we found a boot, just one boot filled with something dark and frozen. The second man was gone too, but we found his hat snagged on a branch, more dark spots in the snow beneath it. We retreated to the cabin, barricading the door behind us. None of us said what we were all thinking. No animal could take two armed men that quickly, that silently. By morning, the storm had passed, and so had the sheriff's skepticism. We found no bodies, only trails of blood leading deep into the forest. When I described Robert's warnings about the Wendigo, the sheriff didn't laugh. He just looked out at the two quiet woods and said they needed to get back to town for reinforcements. They left a video camera with me. Evidence, the sheriff called it. Said he'd be back with more men, better equipment. After they left, I felt strangely empty, lightheaded. I found myself standing at the window for hours, staring into the woods, waiting for something. The hunger that had started in my dreams was with me now when awake, a constant gnawing emptiness. That night, I had another blackout. I came to standing in my kitchen, blood on my hands, my mouth filled with the coppery taste of raw meat. On the table was a half-eaten rabbit, its fur still on. I had been eating it like that, tearing at it with my teeth. I stumbled to the bathroom and threw up until there was nothing left. When I looked in the small mirror above the sink, my own face looked wrong somehow. Thinner, paler, my eyes bloodshot. The next day I remembered the video camera. Maybe it had caught something during the night when the search party members disappeared. I rewound the tape and pressed play. Most of it was darkness and occasional movement as people walked past. Then around 1 a.m. the camera caught something outside the window, a tall, impossibly thin figure moving through the snowstorm. It turned toward the cabin and I froze the frame. The image was blurry, distorted by snow and darkness. But I could make out an emaciated human-like shape with impossibly long limbs. And sprouting from its head were what looked like antlers, massive twisted things that branched out like dead trees against the night sky. My hands shook as I rewound and played it again. The figure moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, like its joints bent in ways they shouldn't. And then it turned directly to the camera, as if it knew it was being watched, and I saw its face, its mouth open too wide, showing too many teeth. But what made my heart stop was the eyes, milky white without pupils, yet somehow familiar. They were eyes I'd seen before. In my bathroom mirror that morning, I shut off the camera and sat in silence for a long time. That thing in the video couldn't be real. And those eyes, they couldn't be mine. I was just tired, scared, seeing things that weren't there. But when I went to the kitchen to make coffee, I noticed something else wrong. The food I'd stored, canned goods, dried meat, flour, everything had spoiled. All of it. Even though the cabin was freezing cold. Cans bulged with pressure, meat turned green with mold, flour crawled with weevils. The smell made me gag. I'd have to go to town for more supplies, but first I needed to check something. I went to the bathroom and looked hard at myself in the mirror. My face looked normal at first. Tired, scared, but still me. Then, as I watched, something shifted. It was like looking at a picture that changes when you move it. For just a second I saw it. Skin stretched too tight over bone, eyes milky white, teeth too sharp and too many. I jerked back from the mirror, heart racing. When I looked again, it was just me, regular me. But I knew what I'd seen. That day, I drove to town in a daze. At the general store, I loaded up on new supplies, barely noticing the looks people gave me. Only when the cashier gasped did I realize something was wrong. "You're bleeding," she said, pointing to my hand. I looked down. My fingernails were gone, torn off somehow. The tips of my fingers were raw and bloody, like I'd been clawing at something. I didn't remember doing it. "Just an accident," I mumbled, paying quickly and hurrying out. Back at the cabin, I tried to make sense of what was happening. I was losing time, finding blood on my hands, seeing things in mirrors. I wasn't crazy. I knew that much. Something was happening to me. Something real and terrible. I pulled out my uncle's journals again, reading more carefully this time. The final entries were frantic scribbles, but one phrase jumped out. "The Wendigo is hunger itself." It doesn't. Just hunt you. It becomes you. That night I heard a knock at my door. I'd been dozing in my chair, dreams full of chasing and catching and tearing, with teeth not my own. The knock jolted me awake. Robert stood on my porch, snow falling gently around him. His face was grim when he saw me. "You didn't use the charms," he said. "Not a question. I didn't believe, but you do now." He pushed past me into the cabin, looking around with sharp eyes. "It's starting, the transformation. I can see it on you." "What do you mean?" He pointed to my face. "Your eyes. Sometimes they change, yes? Food spoils near you. Hunger that won't stop no matter how much you eat." I nodded, fear crawling up my spine. "The Wendigo spirit is taking hold. It's been feeding you, hasn't it? Things you don't remember eating." The habit on my table, blood on my hands. I swallowed hard. "Can you stop it?" Robert didn't answer right away. He pulled items from his bag, herbs, small bones, a stone bowl. "I can try. There's a cleansing ritual. It works sometimes if the transformation isn't too far along." He set up his things on my kitchen table, mixing herbs in the bowl, chanting softly in a language I didn't understand. The smell of burning sage filled the cabin. "Sit," he ordered, gesturing to a chair opposite him. I did as he said. Robert dipped, his fingers in a paste he'd made, and drew symbols on my forehead, my cheeks, my hands. "The Wendigo enters through consumption," he explained, voice low and urgent. "Someone fed you death and hunger. Maybe long ago. It sleeps inside until winter. An isolation wake it." A memory flashed through my mind. Uncle Frank at our Minneapolis home when I was 8 or 9. He'd brought special jerky just for me. It had tasted strange, but I'd eaten it to be polite. Mom had been angry about it later, had fought with him. "They never spoke again after that visit, my uncle," I whispered. "When I was a kid, he gave me something." Robert nodded, unsurprised. "The curse follows bloodlines. Your uncle was fighting his own transformation, trying to pass it on. Maybe trying to escape." He lifted the bowl and continued chanting, the smell of sage growing stronger. My head began to pound, my stomach cramping with sudden, violent hunger. "What's happening?" I gasped. "The spirit fights the cleansing," Robert said, voice rising. "It knows what we're doing." The hunger grew worse, clawing at me from inside. I doubled over, sweat beading on my forehead despite the cold. Something was stirring inside me, something angry and ancient and starving. "Almost done," Robert said, reaching for my hand. But when he touched me, something snapped. Rage and hunger exploded through me like fire. My vision went red, my body moving without my control. I came back to myself minutes or hours later, crouched in the corner of my kitchen. The table was overturned, Robert's ritual items scattered across the floor. And Robert lay still, his throat torn open, blood pooling on the floorboards. His eyes stared at the ceiling, empty of life. I had done this. My hands, my teeth. Memories came flooding back, not just of killing Robert, but other things. The missing search party members. The trapper in his cabin. I remembered breaking through his door, remembered his screams, remembered feeding. I scrambled away from Robert's body, backing up until I hit the wall. Guilt and horror washed over me, but underneath was still that gnawing hunger, unaffected by what I'd done. If anything, it was stronger now. "No," I whispered, "to the empty cabin. No, this isn't me." But I knew it was, or it was becoming me. I had to understand what was happening. I returned to my uncle's journals, reading every word now, desperate for answers. The final journal had entries I'd skipped before, thinking them too crazy, too dark. Now I read them with new eyes. My uncle had been fighting the Wendigo for years. Like me, it had started with voices, with hunger, with moments of lost time. He documented his transformation in clinical detail, how his joints began to pop and stretch, how his teeth fell out and were replaced by sharper ones, how his vision changed to see heat instead of light. But most horrifying was his description of the Wendigo itself, not as a separate creature, but as a parasite. A spiritual sickness passed through consumption of human flesh, lying dormant until conditions were right. My uncle's final entry was a confession and a warning. I fed him the flesh when he was a boy. My brother's son thought it would save me. Pass the curse to him. It only slowed my change. Now I feel it accelerating again. God forgive me for what I've done to Jackson. All I can do now is die far from people, hope the Wendigo dies with me, but I fear it never dies. It only waits. The journal slipped from my fingers. I was shaking, remembering that strange meat Uncle Frank had given me as a child. The special jerky that had made my mother so angry. Human flesh. He had fed me human flesh, planting the Wendigo inside me like a seed. Outside, night had fallen again. The hunger was a constant companion now, along with a strange new sensation. My joints, aching bones seeming to shift under my skin. When I went to the bathroom, I saw my teeth were loose, gums bleeding. The transformation was accelerating. I knew what I had to do. I dragged Robert's body outside, burying it deep in the snow where animals wouldn't find it. Then I gathered everything. I'd need rope, chains, my hunting knife, paper, and pen. I knew where I had to go. The root cellar beneath the cabin was small and dark, accessible through a trapdoor in the kitchen floor. Uncle Frank had reinforced it with concrete walls, not for food storage, I now realized, but as a prison. As a last resort, I climbed down into the cellar with my supplies and a lantern. The space was maybe 8 feet square, with a dirt floor and shelves built into the walls. Perfect for what I needed to do. I used the rope and chains to bind myself to, a metal ring bolted into the wall. I pulled the restraints as tight as I could with my teeth, securing my arms and legs so I couldn't escape, no matter how much the thing inside me wanted to. Then I took the paper and pen and began to write. I wrote down everything about Uncle Frank, the Wendigo curse, my transformation. I explained what the Wendigo was, how it passed from person to person, how it could never be allowed to feed. I wrote until my fingers cramped and the pen ran dry. My body was changing faster now. I could feel my joints popping, bones stretching. My face felt wrong, teeth pushing through gums, skin pulling tight over elongating skull. The hunger was unbearable. A living thing inside me, screaming for flesh. I won't, I said aloud, voice already changing, rougher and higher at the same time. I won't hunt. I won't feed. I'll die here and take you with me. But the Wendigo inside me just laughed. It knew better. It had lived through countless hosts, countless attempts to end it. It was patient. It could wait. As if in answer to my thoughts, I heard an engine in the distance. A car coming up the long drive to my cabin. Who would be out here in this weather? At this hour, the sheriff returning. Robert's people looking for him. The engine stopped. Car doors opened and closed. Then voices, a man, a woman, and the high, clear voices of children. Hello? Anybody home? Our car broke down. My heart froze. A family with children. They'd come to my cabin for help, and I was chained in the cellar, halfway to becoming a monster that hungered for their flesh. The Wendigo inside me stirred, excited by the prospect of such easy prey. I felt my body straining against the chains, muscles pulling with inhuman strength. My jaw stretched open, drool dripping from 2 sharp teeth. Above me, I heard footsteps on the porch, a knock at the door, and then the worst sound possible. The creak of the door opening. I'd left it unlocked. Hello? We're sorry to intrude, but we need help. I fought with everything I had to keep silent. If I called out, they might find me, try to help me, free me, and then I would kill them all. I bit down on my arm to keep from making a sound, tasting my own blood. Above me, I could hear the family, moving around my cabin. Hello? Anyone home? The man's voice called out again. Our car slid off the road a mile back. Phone's dead. We just need to use your phone or wait out the storm. A woman's voice joined his. Jim, look at this place. I don't think there's a phone, but someone lives here. The fire's still warm. Daddy, I'm cold. A child's voice, small and shivery. I know, sweetheart. Let's get you by the fire. I heard them moving around, settling in. The thought of them, warm bodies, fresh meat, made the hunger twist inside me like a knife. My fingers were changing, nails hardening into claws that dug into my palms. I could feel my legs getting longer, joints cracking as they shifted. These chains creaked as my body pulled against them. Not yet, not strong enough yet, but soon. What's that sound? The woman's voice, closer now. She was in the kitchen, right above the cellar door. Probably just the house settling in the cold. The man Jim replied. This place is pretty old. Mommy, look what I found. Another child's voice, excited. It's a door in the floor. My heart stopped. The cellar door. I'd left it unlocked, partly open. Don't touch that, Danny, the mother said quickly. That's not our house. We shouldn't snoop. But I want to see what's down there, the boy complained. Maybe there's treasure. No, honey. Come sit by the fire with your sister. For now, they weren't coming down. But how long would that last? Children are curious. And I was changing faster. Now, the Wendigo growing stronger with living prey so close. I heard them talking, making plans. They'd wait until morning, then hike back to the main road if their car wouldn't start. Jim had looked at my supplies, noted there was enough food to share. They decided I must be in town, would be back soon, if they only knew. Hours passed. Night deepened. The children fell asleep by the fire. The parents talked in low voices, worried about the storm, about getting back to the main road. And while I changed, my skin stretched and hardened, my spine popped and elongated. The hunger was everything now, a living force inside me. The Wendigo was taking over, pushing out whatever was left of Jackson Miller. Then I heard a new sound, footsteps coming toward the cellar door, heavy footsteps. Jim, honey, I'm going to check out that cellar, he whispered. Might be more firewood. Down there. Jim, don't, his wife warned. The owner might not like it. It's freezing, Mary. The kids need to stay warm. I'll just take a quick look. The cellar door creaked open. Light from a flashlight swept down the stairs. Hello? Anyone down there? I pressed myself against the wall, trying to hide in the shadows. But the light found me, illuminating the monster I'd become. Jim's flashlight dropped, bouncing down the stairs. He let out a strangled sound, not quite a scream. What the hell? I could see him clearly now, even in the near darkness. Not with normal eyes. The Wendigo saw heat, the blood pumping through his veins, the warm core of his living body. I could smell his fear, sharp and sweet. Run, I managed to croak, my voice barely human anymore. Take your family, run. But Jim stood frozen on the steps, staring at the twisted thing I'd become. The chains rattled as I strained against them, the metal links beginning to stretch. Jim, what is it? Mary called from above. That broke his trance. He scrambled back up the stairs. We need to leave. Now, get the kids. What? Why? What's down there? Just get the kids. Now! I heard the panic in his voice, the rush as they gathered. Up their half-asleep children. The door slammed, and then the sound of them running through snow toward their car. The Wendigo howled inside me, furious at losing its prey. My body convulsed, bones cracking as they reshaped themselves. With one violent jerk, I snapped the chains binding my right arm. That was all it took. Within minutes, I'd torn free of my restraints, my body no longer even recognizable as human. I was tall now, impossibly tall, limbs long and bent at wrong angles. My skin had stretched and toughened like old leather, and from my head sprouted antlers, heavy and sharp. I tried to hold on to my human thoughts, to remember why I'd chained myself here, but the hunger was too strong. The Wendigo had won. I burst from the cellar, tearing the trapdoor from its hinges. The cabin felt tiny now, ceilings too low for my new height. I had to crouch, moving in a horrible spider-like crawl toward the door. I could smell them, the family, their scent trail fresh in the snow. Outside, a blizzard had started again. Perfect. The Wendigo loved the storm, used it like a cloak. I loped through snow that now barely reached my knees, following their trail with senses no human possessed. Ahead, I heard their car engine turning over and over, failing to start. The cold had killed the battery. They were trapped. Part of me, the small part, still human, screamed to stop, to turn back. But the Wendigo was in control now. I was just a passenger in this monster's body, watching as it hunted. I reached the car just as they spotted me. Through the fogged windows, I saw the mother scream, clutching her children to her. Jim was outside, trying to get the car started. He looked up, saw me looming over him, my antlers scraping the low branches of nearby trees. "Mary, lock the doors!" he yelled, backing away from me. "Take the kids and run when I tell you." The brave fool thought he could distract me, give his family time to escape. The Wendigo found this amusing. It let him back away, watched him grab a tire iron from the trunk. "Stay back," he shouted, waving the iron. "Whatever you are, stay back." The Wendigo cocked its head, my head studying him. Then it spoke, using my voice, but twisted wrong. "Jim, help me. I'm cold." The man's face went white. It was his wife's voice coming from my monstrous mouth. The Wendigo could mimic any voice. It had heard. He swung the tire iron anyway, connecting with my arm. I felt nothing. The Wendigo laughed, a horrible chittering sound, and swatted him aside like a fly. Jim hit a tree hard, slumping to the ground. Not dead, but stunned. Easy prey. The car doors flew open. Mary pushed her children out the other side. "Run into the trees now!" The children, a boy about 10 and a girl maybe 7, stumbled into the dark forest, their mother right behind them. The Wendigo hesitated, torn between easy prey, Jim, and the chase, the others. The hunt won. The Wendigo leapt over the car in one bound, landing in the snow, just yards from the fleeing family. Mary pushed her children behind her, facing me with nothing but her bare hands and mother's courage. "Please," she begged, "not my children." The human part of me fought to surface then, hearing the desperation in her voice. For just a moment I pushed back against the Wendigo's control. "Hide," I gasped, my voice my own again for just a second. "I can't stop it. For long." Confusion crossed her face, then understanding. She grabbed her children and dove behind a fallen log just as the Wendigo reasserted control. It howled in rage at my interference, clawing at its own face, my face in frustration. Then it caught a new scent. Jim had recovered, was trying to circle around to his family. The Wendigo turned, lightning fast, and was on him before he could run. What happened next? I can't write it, won't write it. The Wendigo fed and I was trapped inside, witness to horrors no person should ever see. Mary and the children saw too from their hiding place. I heard the boy whimpering, the girl crying, silently. The Wendigo heard them too, but was too busy feeding to care. When it finished, it let out a satisfied groan. But the hunger never really stops. It was already thinking of the woman and children, already planning the next kill. As it stood, something fell from Jim's pocket into the blood-stained snow. A car key, the spare key most people keep, separate from the main set. The Wendigo didn't notice, but I did. And somehow, through the mental link we shared, so did Mary. I saw her eyes fix on that key, saw the desperate plan forming in her mind. The Wendigo started toward their hiding place, moving unhurriedly now. It knew they were trapped, taking its, and time was part of the enjoyment. "Stay here," Mary whispered to her children. "Don't move until I lead it away." "Mom, no," the boy hissed. "Danny, take care of your sister." When it follows me, you run for the car, use the key in the snow, drive back to the main road. I don't know how to drive. You've watched me. Just get on the road and keep going straight. Someone will find you." She kissed them both quickly. "I love you. Now stay quiet." Before they could argue, Mary burst from hiding, running in the opposite direction from the car. The Wendigo's head snapped toward her, excited by movement. "Hey, over here, you monster!" she shouted. The Wendigo snarled and started after her. Inside its mind, I fought desperately to slow it down, to give her more time. It was like trying to stop a freight train with my bare hands, but I managed to make it stumble just once. That gave Mary a bigger lead. She was running back toward my cabin, probably hoping to barricade herself inside. The Wendigo followed eagerly, enjoying the chase. Behind us, I heard the faint sound of car doors opening. Closing! The children had made it to the car. The key must have worked. Inside the Wendigo's mind, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. Even if I couldn't save their mother, maybe the children would escape. Mary reached the cabin and slammed the door, but it was a flimsy barrier against the Wendigo's strength. It tore through the door like paper, ducking its massive antlered head to enter. She had pushed furniture against the far door, was trying to climb out a window. Too slow. The Wendigo grabbed her, pulled her back inside. But as it turned her to face it, something happened. The Wendigo paused. Through our shared vision, I could see she was holding something. My uncle's journal. She must have found it when they were in the cabin earlier. "I know what you are," she said, voice shaking but determined. "And I know you're still in there somewhere, fighting it." The Wendigo hesitated. It wasn't used to prey that talked back, that seemed to know its secrets. "Please," she continued, "my children, they'll die out there alone." I gathered every bit of will I had left and pushed against the Wendigo's control. For a moment, just a moment, I broke through. "Go," I gasped, my voice my own again. "Car, by the road, find them." Her eyes widened. "You're still human. You can fight it. Not for long. Go." My body convulsed as the Wendigo fought to regain control. I felt my arm release her, saw her scramble toward the door. She paused there, looking back at the monster that had both threatened and spared her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Then she was gone, running into the night toward the distant sound of a car engine. The Wendigo howled in rage, thrashing around the cabin, destroying everything in sight. It had lost its prey, been denied its hunt. And worse, I had found a way to fight back, but the moment of control had cost me. I felt myself slipping further away, the human part of me getting smaller, weaker. Soon there would be nothing left but the Wendigo's endless hunger. Hours passed. The Wendigo paced the cabin like a caged animal, waiting for dawn when it could. Hunt again. I retreated deep into what was left of my mind, holding tight to my last shreds of humanity. Just before sunrise, we heard it. A car engine, not departing but approaching. Multiple engines, voices, men with flashlights moving through the trees. They had come back. Not just Mary and her children, but others. Many others. Through the window, I could see state police vehicles, men with rifles and spotlights. Mary stood, among them, pointing toward the cabin. She'd brought help, too much help for the Wendigo to fight. The Wendigo snarled, looking for an escape route. It could smash through a wall, flee into the deep forest. But these men had guns, vehicles. They could track it, hunt it. For the first time, the Wendigo felt fear. It scrambled up to the cabin's loft, then broke through the roof itself, clambering onto the snow-covered shingles. From there, it could leap to the nearest pine tree, escape, into the forest canopy, where men couldn't easily follow. But as it prepared to jump, a spotlight caught it, pinning it in blinding light. "There, on the roof!" someone shouted. Gunfire erupted. Bullets tore into the Wendigo's body, my body. I felt each impact like a distant punch. The Wendigo roared in pain and anger, but kept moving, leaping for the tree. It never made it. Mid-jump, More bullets hit it. It fell, crashing through snowy branches to land hard on the ground below. The Wendigo tried to rise, to run, but its body was failing. My body was dying. I could feel life draining away with each heartbeat, each pulse of blood from our wounds. Men approached cautiously, rifles trained on the fallen monster. Through eyes already clouding with death, I saw Mary among them, and behind her, her children, the boy and the girl, alive and safe. The Wendigo was dying, its howls becoming weaker. As its strength faded, I felt myself returning, my mind clearing. For the first time in days, with the last of my strength, I managed to speak. Real words, my voice, though coming from the Wendigo's twisted mouth. "Burn. Me," I gasped. "Burn everything." Mary stepped forward, recognition in her eyes. "It's him, the man who saved us." "Burn the cabin, my body," I insisted. "The curse follows bloodlines." Understanding dawned on her face. She nodded solemnly, then turned to the police captain beside her. "You heard him," she said. "We need to burn it all." My vision was darkening now, life slipping away. But I felt at peace. The Wendigo was dying with me. The curse would end, at least this branch of it. Mary and her children would live. The boy, Danny, had gotten them to safety, just as his mother had hoped. As consciousness faded, I thought I saw Sarah standing among the trees, smiling sadly at me. Not the Wendigo's trick this time, but a true vision, coming to lead me home. My last thought was a prayer that the Wendigo's curse would truly die with me, that no other Miller would inherit the hunger that walks in winter. The state police found only one survivor that day, little Emma, Danny's 7-year-old sister. Danny himself had disappeared from the hospital during a power outage 3 nights after the incident. Security cameras showed an impossibly tall, thin figure entering his room during the blackout. Ceiling tiles broken, drag marks leading to the roof. Emma still has nightmares about the hungry man with antlers. She insists he looked a little like her brother around the eyes, and she swears that sometimes on snowy nights she hears Danny's voice calling her name from just outside her window, calling her to come outside, calling her to join the hunger. My name is Victor Walsh. I write scary books for a living, but I never thought I'd end up living in one. That's what happened the summer of 1991, when I bought that cabin by Stillwater Lake. It was supposed to be a fresh start. My last 3 books hadn't sold well, and my wife Sarah had left me 6 months ago. The divorce hit our daughter Lydia hard. She blamed me, of course, said I was always too busy writing to notice my own family falling apart. Maybe she was right. "This is it?" Lydia asked as we pulled up the gravel driveway. She was 16, with dyed black hair and an attitude to match. "It looks like something from a horror movie." I couldn't disagree. The cabin was a 2-story wooden structure that had seen better days. Paint peeled from the sides, and one of the shutters hung crooked. The lake behind it was beautiful, though. Crystal clear water that seemed to go on forever, surrounded by tall pine trees. "It needs some work," I admitted, turning off the engine, "but it's quiet, perfect for writing, and you might like it once you give it a chance." Lydia rolled her eyes and grabbed her backpack. "Sure, Dad. 3 months trapped in the middle of nowhere with no internet, dream summer." I sighed and started unloading our suitcases. This wasn't how I'd planned to spend time with my daughter, but my agent insisted I needed this. "Go somewhere with no distractions," he'd said. "Find your voice again. When I saw the listing for the cabin at Stillwater Lake, something about it called to me. The real estate agent had been suspiciously eager to sell, barely mentioning the previous owner, except to say he'd moved on suddenly. The price was too good to pass up. The inside of the cabin was dusty, but surprisingly well furnished. The main room had a stone fireplace and big windows looking out at the lake. Upstairs were 2 bedrooms and a bathroom with an old clawfoot tub. The kitchen was outdated but functional. "I'll take the room that doesn't face the creepy lake," Lydia announced, heading upstairs. I was setting up my writing desk by the window when a truck pulled up outside. A tall, weathered man in his 50s stepped out carrying a toolbox. "You must be the new owner," he said, extending a calloused hand. "Russell Parker. I do handyman work around these parts." "Victor Walsh," I replied, shaking his hand. "The agent. Mentioned you might stop by." Russell nodded, looking past me at the lake. "Place needs some work. Roof leaks in the main bedroom, and the dock's not safe to walk on." "Anything else I should know about the place?" I asked. He hesitated. It's best not to wander near the lake after dark. Animals get active, you know." Something in his tone made me curious. "What kind of animals?" "Usual forest creatures," he said vaguely. "Coyotes mostly. Some folks say there are wolves, but I haven't seen any myself." He cleared his throat. "I'll get started on that roof." Over the next few days, I tried to settle in. I set up my writing routine. Lydia explored the woods, always returning before sunset, thankfully, and Russell made repairs around the cabin. The place was starting to feel like home, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was while cleaning out a closet that I found the box. It was pushed to the back, behind some old blankets. Inside were notebooks, newspaper clippings, and a folder labeled "The Watchers of Stillwater." The notebooks belonged to Robert Thompson, the previous owner. His handwriting grew increasingly erratic in the later entries. He wrote about local legends, disappearances spanning decades, and something he called the Dogman. When I asked Russell about Thompson, his face darkened. "Robert, he disappeared about 5 years back. Police searched for weeks, but never found a trace. Most folks think he went for a swim in the lake and drowned, but they never found a body." I showed him one of the notebooks. He was researching local folklore, something about watchers. Russell's eyes widened slightly. "I wouldn't put much stock in that. Thompson was different, always asking questions nobody wanted to answer." That evening, I walked into town to get groceries. The local diner was busy with the dinner crowd, and conversations hushed as I entered. I recognized the look, outsider in a small town. I sat at the counter and ordered coffee. "You're staying at the Thompson place," the waitress said. It wasn't a question. "That's right, my daughter and I moved in last week." An older man at the end of the counter looked up. "You know that place has history, right? Thompson wasn't the first to go missing around Stillwater." The waitress shot him a warning look, but he continued. "Check the dates. Always during the waning moon. Been happening for generations." I noticed he wore a leather cord around his neck with what looked like a wolf's tooth dangling from it. Several other men in the diner wore similar necklaces. "What's with the tooth?" I asked. The man touched it reflexively. "Old tradition. Keeps the eyes away." What eyes? But the conversation died as quickly as it had started. I paid for my coffee and left, more curious than ever. When I got back, Lydia was already asleep. I set up the motion-activated wildlife camera I'd bought in town, pointing it toward the lake. If there were animals prowling around at night, I wanted to know what kind. The next morning, I checked the camera. Most of the images showed nothing unusual. A raccoon, some deer at the water's edge. But the last photo made my blood freeze. Standing at the edge of the lake was a figure. It appeared to be a wolf or large dog, but it was standing on its hind legs. The proportions were all wrong. Too tall, at least 7 feet, with arms that hung too long at its sides. Its eyes reflected the camera flash, 2 amber dots in the darkness. I told myself it must be a trick of light and shadow. But as I stared at those glowing eyes, I knew in my gut that whatever watched us from the lake wasn't natural, and I was pretty sure it was watching us right now. I didn't sleep well that night. The image of that tall figure by the lake kept popping into my head every time I closed my eyes. I told myself it was just my writer's imagination running wild. After all, I make up scary stories for a living. But that photo, it looked so real. I was making coffee the next morning when I heard Lydia Come downstairs. You look terrible, she said, grabbing a bowl for cereal. Thanks. I didn't sleep much. She poured milk over her cereal. Me either. I had weird dreams about the lake. Something in her voice made me look up. What kind of dreams? She shrugged. Not meeting my eyes. Just walking. Walking toward the water. A chill ran through me. Lydia, if you ever feel like going to the lake at night, come get me first, okay? Why? What's going on? I almost showed her the photo, but decided against it. No need to scare her. Just being careful. We don't know the area well yet. After breakfast, I drove into town to get more supplies. At the general store, I met a teenage girl named Hannah. She was stocking shelves and offered to help me find what I needed. You're staying at the old Thompson place, right? She asked. Word travels fast, she smiled. Small town, everyone knows everything. She paused. You have a daughter about my age, I heard. Lydia, she's 16. Maybe I could come by sometime, show her around. There's not much to do here, but I know all the good spots. I think she'd like that, I said. Lydia could use a friend. As Hannah rang up my purchases, I noticed a framed photo of her standing with a man in hunting clothes. Your dad? I asked. Her smile faded. Yeah, he went missing 2 years ago, hunting trip near the lake. I'm sorry, they never found him. She shook her head. They said he probably got lost in the woods, but... She trailed off, then gathered herself. Anyway, I'll come by tomorrow to meet Lydia if that's okay. That night I was writing in my study when I heard the front door open. I looked at the clock, 2:17 a.m. I rushed downstairs to find Lydia in her pajamas, hand on the doorknob, eyes open but blank. Lydia! I touched her shoulder. She didn't respond. Lydia! She blinked, looking confused. Dad! What's happening? You were sleepwalking, I said, guiding her back upstairs. You were heading outside. That's weird. I've never done that before. Where? Were you going in your dream? She frowned. The lake. Something was calling me. The next day, Russell came by to fix the dock. I decided to ask him more about the lake. Russell, have you ever noticed anything strange about this place? He hammered a nail into the wooden plank. Strange how? The lake. The way it looks sometimes. Or sounds. He stopped hammering and looked out at the water. This place has been here longer than the town. Native Americans wouldn't camp near it, called it the eye that never sleeps. What does that mean? Instead of answering, he pointed to the boathouse. Those weren't there yesterday. 3 deep grooves ran down the side of the boathouse, as if something with massive claws had scraped the wood. Could be a bear, I suggested, not believing it. Myself. Russell shook his head. Bears don't stand 7 feet tall. That afternoon, Hannah came by to meet Lydia. To my surprise, they hit it off right away. After an hour of talking in Lydia's room, they asked if they could go for a walk. Be back before dark, I warned. With the house to myself, I decided to look through more of Thompson's research. One notebook mentioned an elderly woman named Eliza Morton who lived on the north side of the lake. Thompson had written, E.M. knows more than she tells. Husband taken 1956. I found her address in the phone book and drove there after lunch. Eliza Morton lived in a small cottage surrounded by tall pine trees. She was in her 80s, with wispy white hair and sharp blue eyes that didn't miss a thing. You're the writer, she said when I introduced myself. Living in poor Robert's place. Yes, ma'am. I'm researching the area for a book. I understand your husband went missing some time ago. She invited me in for tea. The inside of her cottage was neat, but crowded with books and old photographs. It was 1956, she said, placing a teacup in front of me. Frank was a logger, good man, never drank, never strayed. One night he went to check our boat during a storm. I heard him scream. What happened? The dogmen took him. She said it simply, like she was telling me it might rain tomorrow. Dogmen? That's what we call them. They're not dogs, and they're not men. They walk on 2 legs, but run on 4. They hunt by the light of the waning moon, and they've been taking folks from around the lake for generations. I tried to keep my voice steady. Have you seen them? She nodded. Once, right after Frank disappeared, standing in our yard, looking up at my window, tall as a doorway, with a wolf's head and a man's body, eyes that glowed like hot coals. Why hasn't anyone reported this? She gave me a pitying look. Who would believe us? Besides, the sheriff knows. Everyone who's lived here long enough knows. We have an understanding. What kind of understanding? They leave us mostly alone if we leave them alone. Don't go asking too many questions. She leaned forward. But they're getting bolder. Something's changed. When I got back to the cabin, Lydia and Hannah were sitting on the porch. "Dad," Lydia said, looking more animated than I'd seen her in months. "Hannah showed me something amazing." Hannah looked nervous. "It's just some old cave drawings." "Native American, sort of," Hannah said. "There are warnings about spirit wolves who walk as men. They were said to protect sacred sites. Did your research tell you which sites?" Hannah and Lydia exchanged looks. "The lake," Lydia said, "but there's more." Hannah showed me a hidden cave. It's filled with missing person posters and newspaper clippings, some dating back 100 years. "All people who disappeared near the lake," Hannah added. I thought about the figure in my photo. I think I need to see this cave. "Tomorrow," Hannah promised. "It's too close to sunset now." That night, my agent Dave called. "Victor, how's the writing coming along?" "It's coming. I've found some interesting local folklore to use." "Great, listen. I have a gap in my schedule. Thought I'd drive up tomorrow, see this cabin of yours." "That's not necessary." "Already on my way. See you around noon." I hung up feeling uneasy. Dave was a good agent, but his timing couldn't be worse. The next morning I was in my study when I heard a car pull up. Dave was early, but when I looked out the window, I froze. Dave's rental car was at the end of the driveway, driver's door open. There was no sign of him. I ran outside. As I approached the car, I saw dark stains on the ground. Then I saw Dave, slumped over the steering wheel. His throat had been torn out. I called the sheriff, who arrived with 2 deputies. They examined the scene in silence. "Animal attack," Sheriff Mills declared. "Probably a bear." "A bear opened his car door?" I asked. The sheriff gave me a hard look. "These things happen in the woods, Mr. Walsh. We'll take care of the body." As they loaded Dave into the ambulance, I noticed something the sheriff missed. The wounds on Dave's neck weren't just tear marks. They formed a pattern, almost like teeth marks, but the bite radius was impossibly large. No natural animal could open its jaws that wide, and there were strange marks that looked like they'd been made by tools. That evening, I noticed Lydia sitting by her window, staring at the lake. "You okay, sweetheart?" She didn't look away from the water. "I can hear them sometimes, whispering. Who? The voices from the lake. They say they know what happened to Mom. Mom's in California, Lydia. She's fine." Lydia turned to me, her eyes distant. "Not that Mom, the real Mom, the one in the water." I didn't know what to say. Lydia had never mentioned anything like this before. Later that night, I found a box I hadn't noticed before, hidden in the back of Thompson's closet. Inside were audio tapes labeled with dates. I put one in the old tape player I found in the same closet. Thompson's voice came through, hushed and urgent. "April 15th, 1986. I've been recording the sounds from the lake at night. There's a pattern to it. Not animal noises, language. They're talking to each other. I've started to recognize certain sounds, certain words." The recording continued with Thompson attempting to mimic strange, guttural noises that made my skin crawl. I was so focused on the tape that I almost missed the movement outside. Looking out the window, I saw Russell walking toward the lake, carrying something. I grabbed my flashlight and followed at a distance. At the lake's edge, Russell placed what looked like raw meat on a flat stone. He knelt, muttered something I couldn't hear, then quickly walked away. I waited until he was gone, then approached the stone. The meat was fresh, red and glistening in my flashlight beam. Some kind of offering? I returned to the cabin and set up my night vision camera facing the lake. Whatever was happening, I needed to see it. The next morning, I checked the footage. For hours, nothing happened. Then, at exactly 3:17 a.m., the surface of the lake began to ripple. One by one, they emerged, tall canine figures, walking upright on two legs. Their fur glistened wet in the moonlight. 5 of them. They moved toward the offering, consumed it, then looked directly at my camera. Their eyes glowed like hot coals. Then, as one, they melted back into the lake, leaving no trace behind. I sat staring at my laptop screen, playing the night vision footage over and over. There was no denying what I'd seen. No tricks of light or shadow could explain those creatures. Dogmen. That's what Eliza had called them. I jumped when someone knocked at the door. It was Russell. "Morning," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Thought I'd fix that loose step on the back. Our porch." "I saw you last night," I said, "by the lake." His face went pale. "Don't know what you mean." "The meat, the offering." "What are you doing, Russell?" He glanced around nervously. "Inside, not out here." Once we were in the kitchen, Russell sank into a chair. "You need to leave this place," he said quietly. "Pack up and go. Today. Not until you tell me what's going on." I showed him the night vision footage on my laptop. Russell stared at the screen, then closed his eyes. "They know you're watching them now." "What are they?" "No one knows for sure. They've been here as long as the lake has. Longer, maybe." "And you've been feeding them?" He nodded. "Everyone around the lake does in one way or another. Keeps them satisfied." "My agent is dead," I said, my voice rising. His throat was torn out. "Was that to keep them satisfied?" "He came here asking questions. Went to the diner, talked to folks about the lake, about Thompson's research. They don't like people who ask too many questions." A horrible thought struck me. "Thompson, did they take him too?" Russell wouldn't answer. That afternoon, Hannah came by to show me and Lydia the cave she'd mentioned. It was hidden behind a small waterfall about a mile from the cabin. Inside, the walls were covered with old missing person posters, newspaper, clippings and handwritten notes. "My dad started collecting these," Hannah explained. "After his friend went missing in '85, he wanted to prove there was a pattern." I examined the wall. The earliest clipping was from 1879. Prominent Boston author vanishes during Adirondack retreat. Next to it was a poster from 1905. Missing. Landscape painter James Holloway, last seen near Stillwater Lake. "They're all creators," Lydia said, looking at the wall. "Writers, artists, photographers." She was right. Every person on the wall had been someone who made things, who captured or created. "Knowledge seekers," Hannah said. "That's what my dad called them. People who notice things others don't." "How many?" I asked. 57 that we know of," Hannah replied. "One every few years, but it's getting more frequent." On the way back to the cabin, I asked Hannah about her father. "He was researching the lake," she said. "He found old surveys showing that Stillwater Lake isn't on any maps before 1879. "What do you mean? The lake is natural, isn't it?" "That's just it. The geological surveys from 1872 show a valley where the lake is now. No water. Then 7 years. Later, suddenly there's a lake." When we got back, I noticed Lydia was quieter than usual. "You okay?" I asked as Hannah left. "I figured something out," she said. "About the dogmen." "What?" "They can't cross running water. I've been watching them at night from my window. They come up to the creek that feeds into the lake, but they won't cross it." She paused. "Except through reflections." "What do you mean?" "They can move through mirrors, through reflections in the water. It's like doorways for them. That evening I drove to the local historical society. The curator, an elderly man named Dr. Winters, seemed nervous when I mentioned the lake. "We don't have much on Stillwater," he said. "Most of our records from that period were lost in a fire." "Convenient," I said. But I'm not leaving until I see what you do have." Reluctantly, he brought out a box of old maps and surveys. Hannah was right. No lake before 1879. Just a deep valley. "What happened?" I asked. "Dam project? Natural disaster?" Dr. Winters hesitated. "There was a mining operation. They dug too deep, hit an underground river. The valley flooded overnight." "That's not all, is it?" He glanced at the door. "There were people in the mine when it flooded, 37 miners, bodies never recovered." He lowered his voice. "Some say the mine broke through to something else, something that had been trapped underground. When I got home, I found a note from Lydia saying she'd gone to Hannah's house for dinner. I used the time alone to listen to more of Thompson's recordings. May 3rd, 1986. I've been tracking the disappearances. They're not random. Everyone who's been taken was trying to document the lake somehow. Writers, photographers, researchers, knowledge seekers. It's as if these creatures are protecting a secret." Another tape, dated later that month. May 28th, 1986. "I think I understand now. The dogmen exist in a fold between worlds. The lake is a thin spot, a place where our world and theirs overlap. But they need reflections to move between. Mirrors, still water, any reflective surface becomes a doorway." A boom of thunder made me jump. A storm was moving in. I texted Lydia to stay at Hannah's if the weather got bad, then continued with the tapes. The last recording was dated just before Thompson disappeared, August 12th, 1986. They know I know. I can see them watching the cabin. I've covered all the mirrors, but the lake itself is one giant reflection. I think I found a way to stop them, but it requires the tape cut off. Whatever Thompson had discovered, he never got to record. Lightning flashed outside, followed immediately by thunder. The storm was directly overhead now. My phone rang. It was Hannah. "Mr. Walsh." Her voice was shaking. "Is Lydia with you?" "No. I thought she was with you." "She was, but she left when the storm started. Said she needed to get back." I looked at the clock. "That was over an hour ago. I'll find her," I said, already grabbing my raincoat and flashlight. The rain was coming down in sheets as I searched the path between Hannah's house and our cabin. No sign of Lydia. I called her name, but the storm swallowed my voice. When I got back to the cabin, I checked every room. Nothing. Then I spotted wet footprints leading down to the lake. At the shore, the beam of my flashlight caught a glimpse of movement. Something large dragging itself into the water, and with it a flash of black hair. "Lydia!" I screamed, racing toward the water. But by the time I reached the shore, the surface was still again, disturbed only by raindrops. I was about to dive in when someone grabbed my arm. It was Hannah, soaked to the skin. "Don't," she yelled over the storm. "That's what they want. They have Lydia." "I know another way," she shouted. "Follow me." She led me back to the cabin and down to the basement. I'd barely explored it before. Just a concrete room with old furniture and boxes. Hannah went straight to a bookshelf against the far wall. "Help me move this!" Together we pushed the heavy shelf aside, revealing a small wooden door. It was locked. "Stand back," I said, then kicked it hard. The old wood splintered. Beyond was a narrow tunnel sloping downward. "How did you know about this?" I asked as we descended, our flashlights making eerie shadows on the rough walls. "My dad found it. It's how Thompson disappeared. He went down here and never came back." The tunnel opened into a large underground chamber. The walls were lined with mirrors of all shapes and sizes, cracked, tarnished, some ancient-looking. But it was what was in the center of the room that made my blood turn cold. A group of figures stood frozen in various poses of terror. They were human, or had been once. Their skin had a grayish cast, and patches of coarse fur grew in places. Some had elongated jaws, others had claw-like hands. All were caught in mid-transformation between human and dogman. Oh, God, I whispered. Are they alive? Hannah finished. In a way, trapped between worlds, neither fully here nor there. I moved my flashlight across the grotesque tableau. At the back, a figure caught my attention. A man in his 40s with a beard and glasses, his hands partially transformed into paws. Thompson, I breathed. As if hearing his name, the figure's eyes opened. Thompson's eyes fixed on me, glassy, but aware. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. He's trying to tell us something, Hannah whispered. I stepped closer, careful not to touch him. His partly transformed hand slowly raised, pointing to a small desk in the corner of the chamber. On it lay a leather-bound journal. I picked it up with shaking hands. The first pages were filled with Thompson's neat handwriting, but halfway through, the writing changed. It became jagged, almost frantic, as if written by someone else. My thoughts aren't my own anymore, I read aloud. They're getting in through the mirrors. Every time I look at my reflection, I feel them pushing into my mind. I flipped to the last page. The writing was barely legible. The manuscript knows. It's writing itself now. They're using me to tell their story, their origins, how they came to be trapped between worlds, how they need human hosts to fully cross over. Don't look at the water. Don't trust the reflections. They're coming. Hannah tugged at my sleeve. Mr. Walsh, we need to find Lydia. She was right. I tucked the journal into my pocket and we hurried back to the cabin. The storm had passed, leaving the night air still and damp. In my study, I found something strange. My laptop was open, a Word document on the screen. I hadn't left it that way. As I watched, words began to appear, typing themselves. We are the forgotten ones. Cast out from the world of light, we hunger for form, for substance. The girl will be the door opener, the girl with the sight. A chill ran down my spine. The manuscript writing itself, just as Thompson had described. Lydia has the sight, Hannah said, reading over my shoulder. She can sense them before they appear. My dad could too. That's why they took him. What does door opener mean? Hannah shook her head. I don't know. But we need to find her before she ends up like those people downstairs. How? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. They took her into the lake. Not exactly. The lake is just a big mirror to them, a way to cross over. She's in the mirror world, the place between. And how do we get there? Hannah hesitated. There's a way, but it's dangerous. We'd need a guide. Russell, I said. He knows more than he's telling us. We found Russell at his small cabin on the other side of the lake. When he opened the door, his eyes were wild with fear. You shouldn't be here, he said. It's not safe. They took my daughter, I said, pushing past him into the cabin, and you're going to help me get her back. Russell sighed, shoulders slumping. It's too late. Once they take someone to the other side. Hannah stepped forward. My father went. Missing 2 years ago. Was that too late too? Something changed in Russell's expression. You're Bill Henderson's girl. She nodded. Russell looked between us, then moved to a cabinet and pulled out a bottle of whiskey. He took a long drink. Your father was different, like the Thompson fella. Like your daughter, he said, looking at me. They can see things the rest of us can't. The sight, I said. That's what some call it. The dogmen want those with the sight, need them. Why? To open the door, the big door. Russell rolled up his sleeve, revealing his forearm. The skin was patchy with coarse, dark fur. I've been fighting it for years, the change, but it's getting harder. I stepped back. You're one of them? Not yet. Not fully. I was attacked as a boy. Got away before they could drag me into the lake. But not before they marked me. He touched his arm. It's been spreading, real slow. Makes me useful to the town. I can sense them, warn folks when they're getting restless. What do they want with Lydia? I demanded. Every 100 years or so, they try to come through all the way, open a door big enough for all of them. They need someone with the sight to do it, someone young, with a strong mind they can shape. The lunar eclipse, Hannah said suddenly. It's tomorrow night. Dad was tracking the cycles. He said the boundaries between worlds get weaker during eclipses. Russell nodded. That's when they'll try to bring her over completely, use her to open the door. How do we stop them? I asked. You can't stop them, Russell said. But you might be able to get your daughter back before it's too late. How? You need to create a trap. Dogmen can't be photographed. They don't show up, but they appear in reflections of photographs. If you can capture one, force it to tell you how to reach the mirror world. And how exactly do I capture one of these things? I asked. Russell walked to a trunk in the corner of his cabin and pulled out an odd contraption, a box lined with mirrors, and a strange mechanism on top. Thompson made this. It's a mirror box. If you can lure one of them into it, the mirrors create a kind of prison. They get confused, can't find their way out. I took the device and the lure. Something they want, Russell said. Something connected to knowledge or sight. Like a writer, I suggested. Russell nodded grimly. Like a writer. That night, I set up the trap by the lake shore. The mirror box sat on a flat rock, inconspicuous in the moonlight. Nearby, I placed my laptop, open to a document filled with everything I'd learned about the Dogmen. I sat a few yards away, pretending to write in a notebook. Hannah watched from the tree line, holding a video camera Russell had modified. Hours passed. The moon rose higher, reflecting off the still surface of the lake. Then, just after midnight, the water began to ripple. A dark shape emerged, tall, canine, walking on two legs. It moved with unnatural grace, water streaming from its fur. Behind it, two more shapes rose from the lake, but stayed at the shore. The first Dogman approached slowly, drawn to my laptop. Its amber eyes gleamed in the darkness. As it bent to look at the screen, I sprang the trap. The mirror box snapped open, panels extending to surround the creature. It howled, a sound like no animal I'd ever heard, part wolf, part human scream. Inside the box, mirrors reflected its image infinitely, confusing it. Now, I shouted to Hannah. She aimed the modified camera and pressed record. Russell had explained that normal cameras couldn't capture Dogmen, but one filtered through running water could record their reflection. The trapped Dogman thrashed and howled. The other two at the shore moved forward, but stopped when I positioned myself between them and the box. Where's my daughter? I demanded of the trapped creature. It snarled, showing teeth too long and sharp to be natural. Where is she? I repeated. To my shock, it spoke, a guttural, rasping voice that seemed to come from somewhere deep and wrong. The girl opens the door. Want her back. She is becoming. Tomorrow night, when the moon hides, the door opens. How do I get to her? The creature's mouth twisted in what might have been a smile. Through the glass, through the mirror, but you will not return. A sound behind me. The other Dogmen were circling, trying to flank us. Hannah, start backing toward the cabin, I called, not taking my eyes off the trapped Dogman. What about you? I'll be right behind you. I needed one more answer. What are you? Where did you come from? The Dogman's eyes flickered, reflecting endless versions of itself in the mirrors. We are the first hunters. Before your kind walked upright, we were trapped below, in the darkness. Now we return. A splash from the lake. More shapes were emerging. Time to go, I said, backing away from the trap. Hannah and I retreated to the cabin, locking doors and windows. Outside, howls filled the night. Did you get what you needed? Hannah asked. I think so. The Dogman said we can reach Lydia through a mirror. And tomorrow night during the eclipse is when they'll try to use her to open some kind of door. A door for what? For all of them to come through. An invasion. Hannah looked at the video she'd recorded. On the screen, the Dogman appeared as a blur of shadow and light, its features indistinct, but its form unmistakably not human. We need to find the biggest mirror in the house, I said. One big enough to climb through. The bathroom, Hannah suggested. There's a full-length mirror on the door. We went upstairs to check. The mirror was old, with a tarnished silver frame. How do we even use it as a doorway? Hannah asked. I remembered Thompson's journal. He wrote something about speaking their language. I pulled out the audio tapes we'd found earlier. For the next hour, we listened to Thompson's recordings of the dogmen's language, trying to mimic the strange guttural sounds. This is crazy, Hannah said after our 10th attempt. Got a better idea? A noise downstairs interrupted us, the sound of breaking glass. I grabbed a baseball bat I'd found in the basement and motioned for Hannah to stay behind me. At the bottom of the stairs, a window was shattered. Standing in the living room was Sheriff Mills and 3 other men from town. Where is she? The sheriff demanded. Who? Don't play dumb, Walsh. The girl, your daughter. She needs to be at the lake tomorrow night. I tightened my grip on the bat. Why? So your dogmen friends can use her to open their door? The sheriff's face hardened. You don't understand. This has been happening for generations. Every 100 years, they take someone to open the way. In return, they leave the rest of us alone. You're sacrificing people to them, I said, disgust rising in my throat. We're surviving, he snapped. This town, these people, we made a pact long ago. One sacrifice every century. It's almost painless for the opener. They become something more. I'm not letting you take my daughter. The sheriff sighed and drew his gun. This isn't a negotiation. Tell us where she is. She's in the mirror world, Hannah said from behind me. The dogmen already took her. The sheriff looked surprised, then thoughtful. Then there's only one way this ends. The girl must complete the opening tomorrow night, or the dogmen will take everyone in town, one by one. There has to be another way, I insisted. There isn't. But if you want to see your daughter one last time before she completes the transition... He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, ornate hand mirror. This belonged to my grandfather. It's a seeing glass. Look into it at midnight, speak the old words, and you'll see the other side. He placed the mirror on the table, then motioned to his men. We'll be back tomorrow night. Don't try to leave town. After they left, I examined the mirror. It was heavier than it looked, with strange symbols etched around the edge. Do you think it works? Hannah asked. Only one way to find out. We waited until midnight. Then, holding the mirror, I recited the words I'd learned from Thompson's tapes, harsh, guttural sounds that hurt my throat. The surface of the mirror rippled like water. Then, instead of my reflection, I saw a grey, misty landscape. In the distance, figures moved, some human, some not. And there, sitting by a dead tree, was Lydia. She looked up as if sensing me watching. Her eyes had changed. They glowed amber in the gloom. Dad? Her voice sounded distant, echoing. Lydia, can you hear me? Dad, don't come here. It's a trap. They want you too. I'm going to get you out. She shook her head. It's too late. I'm changing. But I can still fight it. Don't trust Hannah. What? The mirror went dark before she could answer. I turned to Hannah, who was standing by the door. What did she mean? I asked. Hannah's face was expressionless. I don't know. Something wasn't right. I thought back to everything that had happened since we arrived. Hannah knowing about the hidden cave, the tunnel under the cabin, her showing up right when Lydia disappeared. Who are you, Hannah? Really? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I told you I'm Bill Henderson's daughter. Henderson disappeared 2 years ago, but Thompson disappeared 5 years ago. I stepped closer. You said your father started the wall of missing persons, but when I met you, you said he disappeared while hunting. Hannah's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed just a bit too sharp. You're Thompson's daughter, I whispered. She clapped slowly. Very good, Mr. Walsh. Dad always said you were his favorite author. He was so excited when he heard you bought our cabin. What happened to him? Dad got too close to the truth. Started to change. But he fought it, tried to find a way to close the door forever. Her eyes hardened. The town couldn't allow that. Their precious pact would be broken. So they sacrificed him? They tried. But Dad was smart. He hid in the mirror. World learned their secrets. She moved closer. And now the door will open. Not for them to come through, but for us to go in. I stared at Hannah, trying to process what she just said. Us? You want to go into their world? It's the only way, she said. Dad figured it out. The dogmen need us as much as we need them. They're trapped between worlds, unable to fully exist in either one. They need human hosts to give them form. And what do we get out of this deal? Hannah's eyes gleamed. Power, knowledge, life beyond anything you can imagine. At what cost? Your humanity. Humanity is overrated, she said with a dismissive wave. Look what being human got my father, betrayed by his friends, hunted by his neighbors. I glanced at the sheriff's mirror on the table, thinking of Lydia's warning. You brought us here on purpose, didn't you? You knew about Lydia. Hannah smiled. Dad's research showed your family had potential. Writers often do. Creative minds are more sensitive to the other side. But Lydia, she's special. The dogmen have been watching her for years. Years? That's impossible. Is it? Think back, Mr. Walsh. The nightmares she had as a child. The imaginary friends that weren't imaginary. The way she always seemed to know things she shouldn't. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Lydia had always been different, eerily perceptive, troubled by dreams she couldn't explain. Sarah and I had taken her to therapists, tried medication, but nothing helped. What do you want from me? I asked. Your help. The door can only be opened during tomorrow night's eclipse, and only by someone with Lydia's abilities. But the ritual requires blood from a knowledge seeker, someone like you. I needed time to think. And if I help you? Lydia lives. She becomes like us. But she lives. And if I don't? Hannah's expression hardened. Then she becomes one of those half-things. In the basement, trapped between worlds forever, I pretended to consider her offer. I need to think about this. Don't take too long. The eclipse starts at 11:47 tomorrow night. After Hannah left to make preparations, I searched the cabin frantically for anything Thompson might have left behind that could help. In the basement, I returned to the mirror chamber. The frozen figures remained as before, but this time I looked more closely at Thompson. His eyes followed me as I approached. I'm sorry this happened to you, I said. I'm going to try to help Lydia, and maybe you too. His mouth moved slightly. I leaned closer. Break. All. The words were barely audible. Break all what? Mirrors. Before I could ask more, I heard a noise upstairs. I hurried back up to find Russell standing in the kitchen. The sheriff's gathering the townspeople, he said without preamble. They're coming here at sunset. Hannah is Thompson's daughter, I told him. She's working with the dogmen. Russell didn't seem surprised. I suspected something wasn't right about her. Thompson's real daughter died years ago. Then who is Hannah? One of them, wearing a human shape. They can do that sometimes, for short periods. He rubbed his furry arm. We don't have much time. What did you learn from Thompson? He said to break all mirrors. Russell nodded. The mirrors are gateways. Break them, and you might seal the paths between worlds. But Lydia's on the other side. If I seal the paths, you might never get her back, Russell finished grimly. I ran my hands through my hair. There has to be another way. Maybe there is. Russell pulled a worn leather book from his coat. This belonged to my grandfather. He was part of the original pact with the dogmen, back in 1879 when the mine flooded. The book contained detailed drawings of rituals and symbols, along with descriptions of the dogmen's abilities and weaknesses. There, Russell pointed to a page, a sealing ritual. It doesn't just block the paths, it collapses them, forces everything back to its own world, including Lydia. If she hasn't fully transformed, yes. I studied the ritual. It required specific symbols drawn in blood around the main gateway, the lake itself. and a sacrifice from someone connected to both worlds. My blood, Russell said, seeing my expression. I'm already part of both worlds. As night fell, we prepared. I gathered every mirror in the house and placed them in the basement chamber. If things went wrong, I'd break them all, as Thompson had suggested. At 10 o'clock, headlights appeared on the road leading to the cabin. The sheriff had arrived with what looked like half the town. "It's time, Walsh," he called from outside. "Bring the girl." I stepped onto the porch. "She's not here. The dogmen already took her." The sheriff's face fell. "Then we're too late. The ritual has begun." Behind him, the townspeople murmured nervously. Many wore the wolf's tooth amulets I'd noticed before. "You've been sacrificing people for over 100 years, I said. "Did you ever consider fighting back? Against what?" the sheriff demanded. "Things that can move through mirrors, that can't be killed by normal means, that have been here longer than we have. The pact was the only way." "Not anymore," I said. "I know how to end this, for good." The sheriff laughed bitterly. "Better men than you have tried." But they didn't have this. I held up Russell's book. The eclipse would begin in just over an hour. Russell and I headed to the lake, followed by the sheriff and several townspeople, who were either curious or desperate enough to help. The lake was unnaturally still, its surface a perfect mirror of the night sky. As we approached, I saw movement in the water, shapes swimming just below the surface. Russell began drawing symbols around the shore with a mixture of his blood and lake water. I set up the materials for the ritual: candles, salt, and the sheriff's mirror to serve as a focus point. "When the eclipse reaches totality," Russell explained, "the barrier between worlds will be at its weakest. That's when Hannah and the dogmen will try to open the door. And that's when we'll close it forever," I finished. At 11:30, the moon began to darken along one edge. The lake water started to ripple and churn. Suddenly, Hannah emerged from the tree line, but she wasn't alone. Beside her was Lydia. My heart stopped. Lydia! She looked almost normal, except for her eyes, now fully amber, glowing in the darkness. "Dad," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "You shouldn't be here." Hannah smiled. "We found her wandering in the woods. Seems she found her own way back." I didn't believe it for a second. "Lydia, come here." She shook her head. "I can't. I'm different now. I can see things, know things." "The ritual has already begun," Hannah said. "She's accepted what she is." The moon was half covered now. The lake began to glow with an eerie blue light, illuminating dozens of shapes moving beneath the surface. Russell grabbed my arm. "It's a trick. That's not your daughter. Not entirely. They're using her form to distract you." I knew he was right. But seeing Lydia standing there made my heart ache. How could I go through with the sealing ritual if it meant losing her? As if reading my thoughts, Hannah said, "She can still be saved, Victor. Join us. Cross over with us." "Don't listen," Russell warned. "The eclipse is almost a totality." The moon was now almost completely dark. The water in the lake began to rise, forming a column in the center. Inside it, shapes moved, dogmen, dozens of them waiting to emerge. I had to make a choice. Looking at Lydia, or the thing that looked like Lydia, I made my decision. I grabbed Russell's book and began the ritual, reading the ancient words while completing the circle of symbols around the shore. Hannah's face contorted with rage. "Stop him!" Lydia started toward me, but something held her back. She couldn't cross the line of symbols Russell had drawn. The water column rose higher, turning from blue to a deep, pulsing red. The dogmen inside became more distinct, pressing against what looked like an invisible barrier. The eclipse reached totality. The night went completely dark except for the glowing red column of water. Hannah began a counter-ritual, her voice taking on the same guttural quality I'd heard from the captured. "Dogman." Lydia joined her, their voices creating a terrible harmony. I continued reading, my voice growing stronger. The symbols around the lake began to glow. Russell stepped into the lake. "What are you doing?" I shouted. "Completing the ritual," he called. "Back. Remember, It needs a sacrifice connected to both worlds. Before I could stop him, Russell waded deeper into the water. The column enveloped him. I heard him cry out in pain. Then the water began to freeze. Not just freeze, crystallize, hardening from the inside out. The red glow faded, replaced by a cold blue light that spread from where Russell had disappeared. Hannah screamed in rage and fear. The ice reached the shore, spreading along the symbols we'd drawn. It moved unnaturally fast, crackling and groaning. "Lydia!" I called out. "If you're still in there, come to me now." For a moment, her amber eyes flickered, showing a hint of their original blue. She took a step toward me, fighting against whatever held her. Hannah grabbed her arm. "No, you belong with us now." The ice continued to spread, reaching toward them. Hannah pulled Lydia back toward the tree line. I ran after them, but slipped on the rapidly forming ice. By the time I regained my footing, they had disappeared into the forest. The entire lake was freezing over. In July, the column of water had solidified, trapping the dogmen inside like insects in amber. The townspeople watched in awe and terror. "It's working," the sheriff whispered. "The sealing ritual. It's actually working." A sharp pain hit my side. I looked down to see blood spreading across my shirt. Hannah stood a few feet away, holding a hunting knife. "If we can't cross over," she hissed, "neither can you." She lunged again, but this time I was ready. I grabbed her wrist and twisted. The knife fell to the ice with a clatter. Hannah's face began to change, her features elongating, fur sprouting along her jawline. She was losing her human form. "You've ruined everything," she growled, her voice no longer human. "You never had Lydia, did you?" I realized. "That was just another dogman taking her shape." She snarled, confirming my suspicion. "Where is my daughter? The real Lydia?" Hannah's partly transformed face twisted into a smile. "Where you'll never find her." The ice beneath us cracked. Hannah lost her balance, falling backward. The ice gave way, and she plunged into the water below. But instead of splashing, she seemed to melt into it, disappearing without a trace. The pain in my side grew worse. I stumbled back to shore, where the sheriff helped me sit down. "The ritual," I gasped. "Is it done?" He nodded, looking at the now completely frozen lake. "I think so. I've never seen anything like this." The eclipse was ending, the moon slowly emerging from shadow, but the lake remained frozen solid. "Lydia," I said weakly. "My daughter, she's still on the other side." The sheriff looked grim. "If the paths are sealed," I refused to accept it. I dragged myself back to the cabin, to the basement with its chamber of mirrors. The half-transformed figures were gone, returned to their own world by the sealing ritual, all except one. Thompson still stood there, but his transformation had reversed. He looked almost human again. "Thompson," I said, "can you hear me?" His eyes focused on mine. "Walsh, you did it. My daughter, she's trapped on the other side." He shook his head slowly. "Not trapped, protected." "What do you mean?" "The bathroom mirror. Upstairs. She found a way through, but couldn't fully cross. She's waiting." I climbed the stairs as fast as my injured body would allow. In the bathroom, the mirror looked normal at first, but as I watched, the surface rippled. Lydia's face appeared as if underwater. She pressed her hand against the glass from the other side. "Dad," her voice sounded distant. "Lydia, how do I get you out?" "You can't. Not yet. The seal is too fresh." Her eyes were still amber, but clear and aware. "I'm okay. I'm learning to control it here. I'll find a way," I promised. "I'll bring you home." She smiled sadly. "I am home, Dad. This is where I belong now. I can help keep the doorway sealed." "From this side. For how long?" "Until the next eclipse, July 13th, 2001. A decade away. That's when the seal will weaken again. Be here." Her image began to fade. "Lydia, wait. I love you, Dad. Tell Mom I'm sorry." Then she was gone. The mirror just a mirror again. The sheriff. Found me still sitting there an hour later. The wound in my side had been bandaged by Thompson, who had recovered enough to help. "What happens now?" I asked. "We wait," the sheriff said, "and we prepare. The dogmen won't stay trapped forever." Thompson nodded. "The seal will hold for years, but not forever. When the time comes, we'll need to be ready." I looked at the mirror, thinking of Lydia on the other side. Then we'll be ready. 10 years passed. I never left the cabin by Stillwater Lake. The lake remained frozen year-round, defying all scientific explanation. Researchers came and went. I let them study it, but never told them the truth. Thompson recovered fully and moved to a cabin across the lake. Together with the sheriff, we formed a new pact, not to feed the dogmen, but to guard against their return. I wrote again. Books about a brave girl trapped in another world, fighting monsters. They became bestsellers. Readers thought they were fiction. On July 13th, 2001, I sat by the bathroom mirror at midnight. For 10 years, I checked it every day, hoping for a glimpse of Lydia. Tonight was the night she'd promised to return. The eclipse began. The mirror's surface rippled, and there she was, older now, a woman of 26. Her hair was still black, her smile still the same. "Dad," she said, "you waited." "Every day," I replied, tears in my eyes. "The seal is breaking," she warned. "They're getting stronger. Can you come home?" She hesitated. "I've changed, Dad. I'm not fully human anymore." "I don't care. You're my daughter," she smiled. "It won't be easy. There will be adjustments." "Anything," I promised. She told me what to do. The ritual to open a small temporary doorway, just big enough for one person to cross back. At 3:17 a.m., when the eclipse reached totality, Lydia stepped through the mirror and into my arms. The years that followed weren't easy. Lydia had to hide her amber eyes with special contacts. She struggled to control certain abilities, heightened senses, knowledge of things she couldn't possibly know. But she was home. We moved away from Stillwater Lake, but I knew we'd have to return someday. The dogmen wouldn't stay trapped forever. The next eclipse would come, and with it another attempt to open the door. But that's another story. In 2023, a young couple bought the old Walsh cabin by Stillwater Lake. The lake had thawed mysteriously. A year earlier, after being frozen for over 30 years, a tall woman with dark hair watched from the tree line as they unloaded their moving van. "Look at the lake, honey," the wife called to her husband. "It's so beautiful and still." "Like a mirror," he agreed. The woman in the trees smiled, her amber eyes gleaming in the twilight. They would need watching, these new people. They would need protection when the dogmen tried again. After all, that's what she did now. She protected the boundary between worlds. She turned and walked deeper into the forest, her footprints changing from human to something else entirely. "My name is Michael Reed, and I was 16 when my life changed forever in the Louisiana Bayou." Dad had gotten this big research job studying how oil drilling was messing up the swamps. Mom wasn't happy about moving to the middle of nowhere, and honestly, neither was I. But Dad said it was just for a year, and the money was too good to pass up. We arrived on a sticky hot day in June 1973. The air felt like wet cotton in my lungs, and the mosquitoes greeted us before anyone else did. Our new home was this old plantation house that someone had fixed up just enough to be livable. It sat at the edge of the marsh, surrounded by cypress trees draped with Spanish moss that looked like old men's beards. "It has character," Dad said, cheerfully as we pulled up the gravel driveway. Mom just sighed. "It has mold, more likely. The house was bigger than our place back in Boston, but everything creaked. The wooden floors moaned under our feet like they were telling secrets, and at night, the whole place seemed to breathe with the humid air. My bedroom window looked out over the marsh, which Dad thought was a great view. To me, it just looked like dark water and twisted trees stretching out forever. Dad wasted no time getting to work. The next morning, he introduced us to Jefferson Williams, a local guy who owned a boat and knew the bayou like the back of his hand. Jefferson was tall and thin, with skin darkened from years in the sun. He didn't smile much. "I'll take you where you need to go, Dr. Reed," he told my father as they loaded equipment onto his flat-bottomed boat. "But there's places in that marsh no one should be poking around in." Dad laughed. "Old superstitions?" Jefferson didn't laugh. "Back. Call 'em what you want. Some parts of this swamp even the gators won't go near." I remember the way he said it, not like he was trying to scare us, but like he was stating a simple fact, like saying the sky is blue or water is wet. Dad also introduced us to his research assistant, Olivia Martinez. She was young, maybe in her mid-20s, with dark hair always pulled back in a neat ponytail. She was smart, you could tell just by talking to her, and she knew a lot about the bayou despite not being from around here. One evening, while Dad and Jefferson were planning the next day's expedition, I overheard Olivia telling Mom some of the local stories. "The old-timers talk about things living deep in the marsh," she said quietly. "Things that ain't quite reptile, ain't quite human. They say they've been here since before people came." Mom laughed nervously. "Every place has its monster stories." "Yes," Olivia agreed. "But not every place has so many missing persons cases that never got solved." That shut Mom up pretty quick. School was out for summer, so I had nothing to do but explore. After a few days of boredom, I met Louis, a local kid about my age. He lived in a small house about a mile down the road with his grandparents. Louis knew all the good fishing spots and which parts of the swamp were safe to swim in. "You gotta be careful out here," he told me as we sat on the dock behind my house, our feet dangling over the murky water. "Especially when the moon gets full." "What happens then?" I asked, thinking he was just trying to scare the city boy. Louis looked at me with dead serious eyes. "That's when the scaled ones come out. That's what my grandpa calls them. Says they're most active during the full moon, hunting." "Hunting what?" "Whatever they can catch," he replied simply. "Sometimes gators, sometimes people." I laughed it off, but Louis didn't join in. He just shrugged and changed the subject. About a week after we moved in, Dad came home excited. He'd been testing water samples from different parts of the marsh and found something weird. "The radiation readings are off the charts in this one section," he told Mom over dinner. "It doesn't make any sense. There's no natural source that could explain it. Radiation." Mom looked worried. "Is it dangerous?" "Not at the levels we're seeing, but it's definitely unusual." Dad couldn't hide his excitement. "Scientists are weird, and that way, the stranger something is, the happier they get." The next day, while Dad was out with Jefferson and Olivia, Mom asked me to help her clean out the old boathouse. It was full of junk left by whoever lived there before, mostly broken fishing gear and rusty tools. As I was moving some old crates, something caught my eye in the corner, a strange, translucent material. I called Mom over, and she carefully picked it up. It was some kind of shed skin, like from a snake, but way too big for any snake I'd ever heard of. And the weirdest part? One end of it was shaped like a hand. "What kind of snake has fingers?" I asked, feeling a chill despite the heat. Mom's face went pale. She wrapped the skin in an old cloth and put it on Dad's desk without saying much. That night I woke up to the sound of Mom and Dad arguing in hushed voices. I couldn't make out everything, but I heard Mom say, "I don't like it here, Nathan. Something feels wrong." And Dad replied, "It's just for a year, Catherine. Think of what this research could mean for my career." As I drifted back to sleep, I swear I heard something moving in the water outside my window. Something big, making ripples that slapped gently against the wooden posts of our dock. And for a second, just before I closed my eyes, I thought I saw two yellow dots reflecting in the darkness, like eyes watching our house from the water's edge. I pulled the covers over my head and told myself it was just my imagination. But deep Down, I already knew. The bayou was hiding something and we were about to find out what it was. The next morning, a man in an expensive suit showed up at our door. He introduced himself as Vincent Hayes from the oil company that was paying for Dad's research. I didn't like him right away. He had a fake smile that never reached his eyes. "Dr. Reed, I hope your research is going well," he said, as Mom offered him coffee in the living room. "The company is very interested in your preliminary findings." Dad spread out some papers on the coffee table. "Actually, I found some concerning patterns in the marsh ecosystem. The radiation levels in certain areas are—" Vincent cut him off. "Let's focus on the areas suitable for drilling, shall we? Those other sections aren't relevant to our interests." I watched Dad's face change. He always taught me that good science means looking at all the evidence, not just the parts you like. "With all due respect, Mr. Hayes," Dad said slowly, "environmental impact studies need to be thorough. If there's something unusual happening in that marsh, it could affect your company's operations." Vincent's smile got even faker. "Just remember who's funding this research, Dr. Reed." After he left, Dad looked worried. He didn't say anything, but I could tell the meeting bothered him. That afternoon, a police car pulled up to our house. The local sheriff, Marcus Thompson, wanted to talk to Dad. Sheriff Thompson was a big man with a weathered face and tired eyes. He'd brought photographs of an empty boat they'd found drifting in the marsh. 3 oil workers went missing 2 days ago, he explained, spreading the photos on our kitchen table. This was their boat. Notice anything strange? We all leaned in to look. The boat was intact, but there were deep scratches along one side, like claw marks, but bigger than any animal should be able to make. "Could be gator damage," Dad suggested, but he didn't sound convinced. "Gators don't take 3 grown men without. Leaving blood behind," Sheriff Thompson said, "and they don't usually scratch boats like this." After the sheriff left, Dad locked himself in his makeshift lab at the back of the house. I snuck over and listened through the door as he called Olivia. "The water samples contain some kind of compound I've never seen before," I heard him say. "It seems to be causing mutations in the local wildlife. I need to find out where it's coming from." The next day, Dad and Olivia went to investigate an old abandoned building deep in the swamp. They came back looking serious. It was a military testing facility, Dad told Mom that night when they thought I was asleep. Abandoned since the 50s, but still marked restricted. Whatever they were doing there might explain the radiation and the strange compound in the water. I met up with Louis the next day, and we took his small rowboat out fishing. We went farther than usual to a quiet spot where Louis said the big base liked to hide. "Look at that," Louis whispered suddenly, pointing to the shore. At first I didn't see what he was pointing at. Then I noticed it, an alligator carcass, torn almost in half. We rowed closer, curious in that morbid way kids are. "Something ate it," I said, feeling sick as we got closer. Louis shook his head. "Not just ate it, look at those tracks." Leading away from the dead gator were footprints in the mud. Not animal tracks exactly, but not human either. They were big, with what looked like claw marks at the end of each toe, and they walked on 2 legs, not 4. "What could do that?" I asked, my voice shaking a little. "Kill a gator and walk away?" Louis just looked at me with those serious eyes of his. "The scaled ones," he said quietly. "Told you they were real." We rode back home fast after that. That night Mom couldn't sleep. She sat by the kitchen window with her camera. She used to be a photographer before marrying Dad. She said the moonlight on the water was pretty, but I knew she was keeping watch. The next morning, she showed Dad some photos she'd taken around 3 a.m. In one of them, barely visible at the edge of the trees, was a tall figure standing upright. Even in the grainy photo, you could see its eyes reflected in the flash. 2 bright dots, just like what I thought I'd seen from my window. "It's probably just a person," Dad said, but he didn't sound convinced. "At 3 in the morning, watching our house?" Mom asked. "Nathan, something isn't right here." Dad promised to look into it, but I could tell he was more excited than scared. The scientist in him saw a mystery to solve. That afternoon, a package arrived for Dad. Old records about the plantation house we were living in. He spread them out on the dining table, and we all looked through them together. "This place has a strange history," he said, pointing to a list of owners. "Every few decades, people just disappeared. During the Civil War, an entire family vanished overnight. Their belongings were still here, but they were never found. Maybe they just left in a hurry," I suggested, "without taking anything." Dad shook his head. "And they weren't the only ones. Look at these reports, 1923, 1946, 1958, all reports of residents who vanished. That evening, Jefferson came by with an old leather journal. It had belonged to his grandfather. "You need to see this," he told Dad, his voice grim. "My granddaddy started writing this in 1924, after he saw something in the deep marsh he couldn't explain." Jefferson's grandfather had documented sightings of what he called lizard men, creatures that looked part human, part reptile. The journal had crude drawings and locations marked on a hand-drawn map. "These are the same areas showing high radiation today," Dad said, comparing the journal's map to his research data. The next day, Dad went to explore the restricted military zone Jefferson had pointed out. He didn't want anyone coming with him, not even Olivia. When he came back late that night, his clothes were muddy and torn. "There are sealed bunkers out there," he told Mom, his voice low and urgent, "with radiation warning signs that looked decades old. The military was definitely conducting some kind of experiments." Dad had managed to collect a small sample of soil from near one of the bunkers. He stayed up all night analyzing it in his lab, along with the shed skin Mom had found in the boathouse. In the morning, his eyes were red from not sleeping, but he looked energized. "The DNA structure in this skin sample is impossible," he said, showing us slides under his portable microscope. "It has aspects of reptilian DNA, but mixed with what appears to be human genetic markers. Nothing like this should exist in nature." "What are you saying?" Mom asked, her voice shaking. Dad looked up from his microscope, his face pale. "I'm saying someone or something engineered a hybrid creature, and from what I can tell, it's still out there." That night, as I lay in bed listening to the sounds of the marsh through my open window, I realized the stories Louis had told me weren't just local legends. The scaled ones were real, and they were watching us. That night, I had the strangest dream. I was swimming deep in the marsh, but I didn't need to come up for air. The murky water felt good against my skin, and I could see clearly despite the darkness. Fish darted away as I approached, and I felt powerful, like I belonged there more than I ever belonged on land. I woke up gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat. The dream had felt so real that for a moment I was surprised to find myself in bed instead of underwater. At breakfast, I didn't tell Mom and Dad about the dream. They were already worried enough. Dad was getting ready to head out with Jefferson to check on his research equipment, and Mom was taking photos of the plantation house for documentation. "The oil workers are getting spooked," Jefferson told Dad, as they loaded the boat. 3 more reported their equipment was damaged overnight, said whatever did it had to have hands. Regular animals couldn't have done that kind of damage. "Hands?" Dad asked. Jefferson nodded. "One guy said they looked like gator hands, but could work tools. He found his radio dismantled piece by piece." "That suggests intelligence," Dad said quietly, "not just animal behavior." "That's what scares folks around here," Jefferson replied. "These things, whatever they are, they think. They ain't just animals." After they left, I helped Mom clean, up from breakfast. She seemed jumpy, watching the tree line through the kitchen window as she washed dishes. "Michael," she said suddenly, "would you help me check something in the East Wing? There's a room I've been wanting to look at." The East Wing of the house had several rooms we hadn't really explored yet. Mom led me to a small study at the end of the hallway. The door was stiff, like it hadn't been opened in years. Inside, we found old furniture covered in dusty sheets. Mom went straight to a bookshelf on the far wall and began pulling out books. "What are we looking for?" I asked. "This house belonged to a doctor during the early 1900s, she said. I found a reference to him in some old newspaper clippings. He was known for his unusual research interests. One of the books came forward with a click, and suddenly the entire bookshelf swung outward, revealing a hidden room behind it. We stared in shock. The secret room was small, with shelves lining the walls, and on those shelves were glass jars, filled with cloudy liquid. Inside each jar was something. Body parts, specimens. Some looked like alligator limbs, others like human hands, and some were combinations that shouldn't exist. "Oh my God," Mom whispered, her hand over her mouth. In the center of the room sat an old desk with a leather journal. Mom picked it up with shaking hands and flipped it open. The plantation owner was experimenting with combining reptile and human DNA, she said, her voice trembling as she scanned the pages. Long before modern genetic science was supposed to exist, he was mixing voodoo practices with early biology. Mom took photos of everything, then we closed up the room and tried to make it look like we hadn't been there. She didn't want to tell Dad yet. She needed time to understand what she'd found. That afternoon, Olivia came by the house to drop off some equipment. I noticed she seemed tired and kept rubbing her back like it hurt. "You okay?" I asked her while Mom was out of the room. "Just tired," she said with a thin smile. "This research is intense." When she thought I wasn't looking, I saw her pull out a small notebook. The page she opened to had strange diagrams, drawings of what looked like the stages of something transforming, from human to reptile. Later that day, I went to hang out with Louis by the water. He was showing me how to set traps for crawfish when I noticed my hands looked weird in the sunlight. The skin between my fingers seemed thinner, stretched, almost like it was starting to web. "What's happening to your hands?" Louis asked, noticing. "Two." I quickly shoved them in my pockets. "Nothing, just a rash or something." That night at dinner, Dad was excited about his latest findings. "The local hospital records show a pattern," he told us. "For decades, families living near that military testing site have had children born with unusual characteristics. Webbed fingers, sensitive skin, unusual eye colors." Mum looked at me strangely when he said, "webbed fingers," and I kept my hands under the table. "Catherine," Dad continued, turning to Mom, "I think that military facility was conducting genetic experiments, maybe trying to create soldiers who could operate in swamp environments." "Soldiers?" Mom asked. "You mean people?" Dad hesitated. "Or maybe they were trying to modify animals. Either way, I think something escaped, or was released intentionally." The next morning, Jefferson showed up at our door with bandages covering his arms and face. His boat had been attacked the night before by something in the water. "It came from below," he told Dad, his voice shaky. "Pulled at the motor first like it knew that would stop me from getting away. Then it tried to tip the whole boat. I only got away because I hit it with my paddle and sped off." Jefferson's arms were covered in long, deep cuts. "Doc, these ain't normal animal claws. They're too precise." Dad cleaned and rebandaged the wounds properly. "Jefferson, I need to see your grandfather's journal again. I think there might be details I missed." While Dad and Jefferson talked, I snuck out to meet Louis. But when I got to our usual spot, he wasn't there. I waited for an hour, then decided to check his house. His grandmother answered the door, looking worried. "Louis didn't come home last night," she said. "We thought he might be with you." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Louis was missing. I hurried back home to tell Dad, but when I got there, Vincent Hayes' fancy car was parked out front. I crept up to the window and listened. "Your research has turned up some very interesting findings, Dr. Reed," Vincent was saying. particularly about these creatures you've documented. I haven't shared those findings with your company yet, Dad said, his voice tight. Vincent smiled that fake smile. Let's just say my division has wider interests than oil. Bioweapons research is a growing field, and organisms that can survive radiation and toxic environments are valuable. Dad looked disgusted. So that's what this is about? Weapons research? The military lost control of their project years ago, Vincent said. We're simply trying to reclaim the assets. After Vincent left, Dad told Mom and me everything. The oil company knew about the creatures all along. They'd been working with the military to restart the old program from the Cold War era. It was called Operation Saurian, Dad explained. They were trying to create super soldiers who could operate in toxic environments, nuclear fallout, chemical warfare zones. And they used that military facility in the marsh, Mom said. Dad nodded. But something went wrong. The test subjects escaped into the swamp and adapted. They've been out there for decades, evolving, reproducing. I thought about my webbed fingers, the strange dreams of swimming underwater. A horrible thought was forming in my mind, but I was too scared to say it out loud. That night, I stared at my hands in the bathroom mirror. The webbing was definitely getting worse, and my skin felt dry, itchy, like it needed water. When I scratched my arm, a small patch of skin came loose, revealing something smoother and greener underneath. I was changing, becoming something else. And I had no idea how to stop it. The next night was a full moon. I remember because I couldn't sleep. My skin was itching like crazy, and I felt drawn to the water outside. Around midnight, I heard strange sounds coming from the marsh. Splashing, hissing, and something that sounded almost like singing, but not quite human. I crept downstairs and found Dad already at the window, watching the swamp with his binoculars. There's activity all over the marsh tonight, he whispered when he noticed me. More than I've ever seen. Through the binoculars, I could make out shapes moving in the moonlight, tall figures wading through the shallow water, some swimming, others climbing trees with ease. They moved like people, but looked nothing like any person I'd ever seen. You think they took Lewis? I asked, my voice barely audible. Dad put his hand on my shoulder. I don't know, son. But I'm going to find out. Sheriff Thompson showed up early the next morning. He looked like he hadn't slept. 3 more people missing, he told Dad grimly. 2 fishermen and a kid from the gas station. This is getting out of hand. Have you noticed a pattern to the disappearances, Dad asked? The sheriff nodded. Been going through the records like you suggested. Most disappearances happen during hurricane season. Been that way since at least the 1940s. They're using the storms as cover, Dad said. When everyone's distracted by evacuation and bad weather, they can move around more freely. You really believe these creatures are responsible? Sheriff, Thompson asked, looking uncomfortable. I've seen them, Dad replied simply, and I think they're getting bolder. Later that day, Dad returned from his research station looking devastated. The place has been ransacked, he told us. All my equipment destroyed, samples missing, data stolen. The creatures, Mom asked. Dad shook his head. Too precise, this was human. Vincent Hayes, I said. Most likely, Dad agreed. Or someone working for him. That afternoon, I couldn't stop thinking about Lewis. What if he was still alive somewhere? I decided to go to the spot where we'd found the half-eaten alligator. Maybe there would be some clue about where the creatures lived. I shouldn't have gone alone, but I was scared and not thinking straight. When I got to the spot, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A trail of blood leading from the waters, edge into the trees. I followed it, my heart pounding. The trail led to a small opening between 2 cypress trees. At first, it looked like just a dark hole, but as I got closer, I realized it was the entrance to an underwater cave. Part of it was above water level, creating a small air pocket. Before I could decide what to do, I heard a splash behind me. I turned to see a man standing in the shallows, except it wasn't exactly a man. His skin had a greenish tint, and his eyes were yellow with vertical pupils. He was wearing tattered clothes, but they couldn't hide the scales visible on his neck and arms. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The creature, the man, just stared at me. Then he spoke. "Michael Reed," he said, his voice raspy but clear. "Son of Nathan Reed." Hearing my name coming from his mouth was terrifying. "How do you know who I am?" I managed to ask. We watch. We listen. His head tilted to one side, studying me. "You're changing. We can smell it in your blood." I backed away slowly. "Where's Louis? Did you take him?" The creature made a sound that might have been a laugh. "The boy followed us, curious, like you. Is he alive?" "For now." The creature pointed to the underwater cave, "Down there, with the others." Before I could ask more questions, the creature dove into the water and disappeared. I ran all the way home, my lungs burning. When I burst through the door, Mum was sitting at the kitchen table with Olivia. They both looked up in alarm at my panicked state. "Michael, what happened?" Mom asked, rushing to me. Between gasps for breath, I told them about the creature, the cave, and Louis. Mom's face went pale, but Olivia looked unsurprised. "You knew," I said suddenly, staring at her. "You knew about them all along." Olivia sighed. "Not all along, but yes, I've known for a while." Mom turned to her, betrayal plain on her face. "Who are you really?" "My father was a scientist at the military facility," Olivia admitted. "He worked on Operation Saurian until it was shut down. When the subjects escaped, he stayed in the area to monitor them, to study how they evolved." "Your father experimented on people?" Mom's voice was shaking with anger. "Not people. Not originally," Olivia said defensively. "They started with alligators, trying to enhance their abilities. Then they moved to combining reptile DNA with human DNA. The goal was to create soldiers who could survive in toxic environments." "And now?" I asked. "Now there's something new," Olivia said. "A species adapting and evolving faster than any natural organism should be able to. That's why I came here, to continue my father's research." Just then Dad rushed in. "There's a hurricane warning," he said, not noticing the tension in the room. "Category 3, making landfall in 2 days. We need to prepare." "Nathan," Mom said, her voice tight, "Olivia has something to tell you." After Olivia repeated her story, Dad was silent for a long moment. Then he asked, "The pregnancy test Catherine found in your things, is it positive?" Olivia looked down at her hands. "Yes." "Is the father human?" Dad asked quietly. "Mostly," she whispered. We all stared at her in shock. "They're not mindless monsters," Olivia continued, sounding desperate for us to understand. "They're evolving, developing higher intelligence with each generation. Some can even pass for human now, at least for short periods." "Like Vincent Hayes?" I suggested suddenly, remembering how wrong he had seemed. Olivia shook her head. "No, he's human, just a bad one. But there are others among us, watching, infiltrating." Dad paced the room. "I've seen evidence of their intelligence. One of them sabotaged the oil drilling equipment. Precisely and deliberately, they're protecting their territory." "Their breeding grounds," Olivia corrected. "That's what they care about most, the next generation." That night, while the wind was picking up outside as the hurricane approached, Vincent showed up again, this time with 4 men in unmarked black uniforms. "We're here for the specimens, Dr. Reed," he announced. "We know you've been keeping samples." "I don't have any specimens," Dad protested. "Then we'll find our own," Vincent said coldly. "Our intel says there's a juvenile in the area. Should be easier to capture than the adults." I froze, thinking of Louis. Was he the juvenile they were after? Or was it something else, something born in that underwater cave? The men spread out, searching the property. One headed toward the boathouse, and I followed quietly, staying in the shadows. Through the window, I watched him set up what looked like a cage, with some kind of bait inside. Suddenly, there was a splash, and something rose from the water beside the dock, a smaller version of the creature I'd seen earlier. It looked more human than the adult, with only faint scales on its arms and neck. The man readied a tranquilizer gun. Without thinking, I burst into the boathouse. "Look out!" I shouted to the creature. The man spun around, the gun now pointing at me. But before he could shoot, something large erupted from the water and grabbed him from behind. It happened so fast. 1 second he was there, the next he was gone, with only ripples in the dark water to show where he'd been. An alarm sounded from the house, followed by gunshots. I ran back to find chaos. The front door was broken open, and 2 of Vincent's men were down. Something had attacked them. Vincent himself stood in our living room, a gun in one hand and a radio in the other. "Assets secured," he was saying into it, "requesting immediate extraction." At his feet was a net containing something thrashing and hissing, a creature smaller than the others I'd seen, maybe the size of a child. "Let it go," Dad demanded, his own gun pointed at Vincent. Vincent smiled. "I don't think so, Doctor. This specimen is too valuable." That's when we all heard it, a sound like nothing I'd ever heard before, a high-pitched wail that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was a call, a signal. "They're coming," Olivia whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "All of them." As if on cue, the lights went out, plunging us into darkness. In the darkness, I felt different. My eyes adjusted faster than they should have, and I could see shapes moving around the room. The skin on my arms and neck felt tight, and when I reached up to touch my face, small patches of scales met my fingertips. "Dad," I whispered, "I can see in the dark." Before he could respond, something smashed through the window. 2 more creatures entered the room, moving with incredible speed. One grabbed Vincent's remaining guard, while the other went straight for Vincent himself. Vincent fired his gun, the flash briefly lighting up the room. The bullet hit the creature, but it barely slowed down. It knocked the gun from Vincent's hand and pinned him against the wall. "Where is the child?" the creature demanded in that same raspy voice I'd heard earlier. Vincent pointed shakily to the net on the floor, where the small creature had stopped moving. Dad used the distraction to grab the netted creature. "It's just tranquilized," he said after checking it. "Still alive." The larger creature released Vincent, who slumped to the floor and turned to Dad. "Return offspring," it demanded. Dad carefully removed the net. The small creature lay still, its chest rising and falling slowly. "Nathan," Mom said suddenly, "where's Michael?" Everyone looked around, but I wasn't hiding. I was standing right there, yet somehow, in the dim light with my changing skin, they couldn't recognize me. "I'm here," I said. Mom gasped when she saw me clearly. "Michael, your skin." I looked down at my arms. The patches of scales had spread, covering most of my forearms now. My fingers were fully webbed, and when I spoke, I could feel that my teeth were different, sharper. "He is becoming," the creature said, looking at me with what seemed like approval. "The water calls to his blood." "This is impossible," Dad whispered. "How could he be changing so quickly?" Olivia stepped forward. "The compound in the water accelerates genetic changes. He's been drinking it, swimming in it, and if he had any latent markers in his DNA to begin with..." "What are you saying?" Mom demanded. "I'm saying one of Michael's ancestors may have been part of the early experiments," Olivia explained. "The genes can stay dormant for generations, then activate under the right conditions." The wind outside was getting stronger, rattling the windows. The hurricane was getting closer. "We need to get to higher ground," Dad said, looking at the creatures. "All of us." The creature picked up the small one. "No, we go deeper. Water is safety." Just then, Olivia doubled over in pain. "The baby," she gasped. "Something's wrong." The creature's head snapped toward her. "You carry egg, child?" "Yes," she managed through gritted teeth. She comes with us, the creature decided. Water birth is stronger. No, Dad protested. She needs a hospital. But Olivia was already moving toward the creature. There's no time, Nathan, and no hospital could handle this birth. Then we're coming too, Dad insisted. All of us. The creature hesitated, then nodded once. Follow! Quick! We hurried out into the storm. The wind was so strong it was hard to stay upright, and rain lashed at our faces. But I felt strangely energized by it all. The creatures led us toward the water, where several more waited with a large, flat-bottomed boat. What about Louis? I shouted over the wind. You said he was alive. Other young one is at nest, the creature replied. You see soon. As we pushed off into the churning waters of the marsh, I noticed Vincent staggering down to the shore behind us, shouting into his radio. Moments later, bright lights appeared in the distance, helicopters heading our way. Military, Dad said grimly. They're coming for the creatures. And for Michael, Mom added, her voice breaking as she looked at my transformed hands. The creatures paddled the boat with incredible strength, taking us deeper into the marsh than I'd ever been. The wind howled around us, bending the cypress. Trees nearly in half. Twice we had to duck as uprooted trees flew over our heads. Finally, we reached the underwater cave I'd found earlier, but now I could see it was just one entrance to a vast network of tunnels. Down, the lead creature said. Air pockets inside. One by one, we had to dive underwater and swim through a short tunnel before emerging in a large cavern. Amazingly, I found I could hold my breath much longer than before, and my eyes could see clearly underwater. The cavern was lit by a strange, greenish glow coming from patches of moss on the walls, and it was full of creatures. Dozens of them in various stages of transformation. Some looked almost entirely human, others were more reptilian. And there, huddled in a corner with a few other humans, was Louis. He looked scared but unhurt. Louis! I called out. He looked up, squinting in the dim light. Michael, is that you? Before I could reach him, Olivia collapsed, crying out in pain. The creatures gathered around her, making that strange singing sound I'd heard the night of the full moon. What are they doing? Mom asked fearfully. It's a birthing ritual, Dad realized, watching in fascination. They're helping her. Deeper, in the cavern, I could see hundreds of eggs nestled in shallow pools of water. Some were clear enough to see small shapes moving inside them. This is their hatchery, Dad said in awe. Their future. A loud explosion shook the cavern, sending small rocks falling from the ceiling. The military had arrived. They find us, the lead creature hissed. Always hunt us. Let me talk to them, Dad offered. Maybe I can explain, make them understand. The creature shook its head. No understand, only destroy. Another explosion. Closer this time. The baby creatures around the eggs grew agitated, making high-pitched keening sounds. There's another way out, Louis said suddenly, coming over to us. They took me through it when the storm started. It leads to the river. The Mississippi? Dad asked. But that's miles from here. Underground. River, the creature explained. Connect all. More explosions. The cavern shook violently. Cracks appeared in the ceiling and water began to seep through. Nathan, we have to go, Mom urged, looking at the weakening ceiling. But the research, the evidence, Dad protested. Forget the research, Mom cried. Our son is turning into one of them, and I want him to live. Just then, Olivia gave a final cry, and the creatures around her moved aside. In her arms was something. Not quite human, not quite reptile. A baby with iridescent scales and large, dark eyes. The lead creature touched the baby gently. New kind, it said. Better than both. The cavern shook again, and this time large chunks of rock fell from the ceiling. Water poured in from above. The hurricane storm surge is breaching the cavern, Dad shouted, and the explosions are weakening the structure. This whole place is going to flood. The creatures moved with sudden urgency, gathering the eggs. The lead creature turned to us. Come, Riverway. We followed the creatures through a twisting tunnel that sloped gradually upward. Behind us, we could hear the cavern collapsing, water rushing in. Louis stayed by my side, not even flinching at my scaled skin and webbed hands. They didn't hurt me, he told me as we ran. They just wanted to know about the surface. They asked questions every day. They can talk, I asked. The older ones can, Louis said. They're smart, Michael, really smart. The tunnel eventually opened into a larger chamber with a fast-flowing underground river. The creatures were loading eggs onto makeshift rafts. Mississippi, take us south, the lead creature told Dad. New home. You're evacuating, Dad realized, using the hurricane as cover to relocate your entire population. The creature nodded. Military cannot follow in storm. By water we faster, stronger. Dad looked back toward the entrance we'd come. Through! Water was already starting to flow in. We need to get to the surface, he told Mom, before this whole system floods. What about Michael? Mom asked, her voice breaking. Look at him, Nathan. He's still changing. I looked down at my hands, now almost completely webbed. The scales had spread up my arms to my shoulders. I could feel them on my face, too. He choose, the lead creature said unexpectedly, looking at me. Human life or water life. What do you mean, choose? Dad demanded. His change not complete, the creature explained. Still human enough to stay human, or become like us. His blood decide. I looked at Mum and Dad, then at Louis, then at the creatures preparing to leave. For the first time in my life, I felt torn between two worlds. I can't leave you, I told my parents, my voice catching. Oh, Michael, Mom whispered, touching my scaled cheek. The water was rising faster now. The creatures began to release their rafts into the current. Decide now, the creature urged. Water rising. Dad put his hands on my shoulders. Whatever. You choose. You're our son. Always. At that moment, there was a tremendous crash behind us. Part of the tunnel collapsed, and water surged into the chamber. In the confusion, I lost sight of my parents and Louis. I was swept toward the underground river, along with several of the creatures. Mom! Dad! I called out, but my voice was lost in the roar of water. The current caught me, pulling me into the river alongside the egg rafts. I could breathe underwater now, I realized, as I was swept along. The river carried us for what felt like miles, twisting and turning underground. When I finally emerged into daylight, I was in the Mississippi River. The hurricane was still raging, the sky dark with clouds. Around me, dozens of creatures were surfacing, guiding their egg rafts into the current. I looked back toward where we had come from, hoping to see my parents or Louis. Instead, I saw military helicopters circling in the distance. Searchlights. Cutting through the rain, one of the creatures swam up beside me. Your family find way out, it said, as if sensing my thoughts. Humans survive. How do you know? I asked. Feel them, the creature replied, tapping its head. Connected now, like you. And strangely, I understood. Deep inside, I could feel a new sense, a knowledge that my parents and Louis had indeed found another way out. They were alive. The creature pointed downstream. We go south, deep swamps, safe there. I looked down at my transformed body, then back toward where my old life lay. The choice the creature had mentioned wasn't just about staying or going. It was about accepting what I was becoming. As the current carried us southward, away from the military helicopters and into the vast network of southern swamps, I made my choice. I would go with them, at least for now. I would learn about what I was becoming, about this new species that was neither fully human nor reptile, but something evolving into something new. Maybe someday I would return to find my family. to show them that I was still Michael, even with scales and webbed hands. But for now, the water called to me, and I answered. From the helicopter sent to evacuate the last residents of the area, a National Guard pilot reported something strange. Through the storm, hundreds of dark shapes moving through the Mississippi River, heading south into the vast, unmapped swamplands. By the time reinforcements arrived, there was nothing to find but empty tunnels and abandoned research equipment. The military denied everything, of course. They claimed the radiation readings were normal, that there had never been a testing facility in the marsh. The oil company brought in cleanup crews and continued drilling as if nothing had happened. But the locals knew better. And from that day on, the stories about the scaled ones grew more frequent. Sightings spread beyond the Louisiana Bayou, into the Everglades, up the Mississippi River Basin, even into the lake systems of the Midwest. A new species was emerging, evolving, spreading, and I was one of them.